iced out. Ich geh mit dem Bruder raus. Macht das Handy, Bitch. Jacke ist von Heavy, Bitch. Shit. Ja, das ist iced out. Ich geh mit dem Bruder raus. Fahre schnell, ich gebe Gas. Ich gebe dieses Leben ab. Scheiße, dein Paper find ich ekelhaft. So schreibe mit den Brüdern und zwar jeden Tag. Ja, alles iced out, Hurricane. With the bassline breaks, baby. Hurricane, ja. Don't start, gib Gas. Ich geh mit dem Brüder raus.
Favorite.
R.I.M. Lamborghini, Bentley, alles ist iced out. Ich geh mit dem Brüder raus. Mach das Handy, Bitch, Jacke ist von Heavy, Zigarette, Lamborghini, Bentley, alles ist iced out. Ich geh mit dem Brüder raus. Mach das Handy, Bitch, Jacke ist von Heavy, Zigarette, Lamborghini, Bentley, alles ist iced out. Ich geh mit dem Brüder raus.
Sie sagt, sie kann nicht ohne mich. Sie sagt, sie kann nicht ohne mich. Ja, ja, ja. Sie macht alles, was ich will. Ja, 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 ja. Sie will lass uns heute chillen. Ja, 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 ja. Sie macht alles, was ich will. Ja, 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 ja. Sie will lass uns.
This is UFO 361.
But this year it's one
Nice
like
girl
no other,
2.0.
not only because it's virtual, but because all eyes are on a conflict overseas that's coming up.
That sounded pretty important.
Die ganze Nacht lang Party, die kriegen dir kein Bacardi. Ja, 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 sie macht alles, was ich will. Ja, 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 sie will lass uns heute chillen. Ja, 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 sie macht alles, was ich will. Ja, 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 sie will lass uns heute chillen. Sie ist ein Meister, sie ist ein Meister, sie ist ein Meister. Ja, ich hoffe, dass du weißt, ich habe schon mal Zeit, ich habe schon mal Zeit. Ja, 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 ja. Baby, ich krieg nicht genug, nein, 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 nein. Denn sie hat alles das, was ich suche, ja, ja, ja. Ja, wir sitzen im Finger, fliegen weg, nein, wir kommen nicht wieder, nein. Ciao, ciao, komm, wir reisen um die Welt, ja. Ja, ja, komm, wir feiern uns selbst, ja. Ja, ja, ich habe schon mal Zeit, ja. Ja, nur noch positive Vibes, ja. Ja, ich erfülle jeden Wunsch, ja. Ja, ich mach das alles nicht für uns, ja. Ey, meine Frau, ja, check vielleicht ein Haus, sie war wieder UFO, du bist ein Weib, ich fühle mich gleich bei dir. Sie macht alles, was ich will.
Come on, try it.
Sie macht alles, was ich will. Baby, lass uns heute chillen. Baby, lass uns heute chillen. Sie macht alles, was ich will. Baby, lass uns heute chillen. Sie macht alles, was ich will. Baby, lass uns heute chillen. Sie ist ein Meister. Sie ist ein Meister. Sie ist ein Meister. Ja, ich hoffe, dass du bleibst. Ich habe schon mal Zeit. Ich habe schon mal Zeit. Ja, ja,
On Stack TV, businesses have been turning.
Sie sagt, sie kann nicht ohne mich. Ja, ja, ja. Sie kann nicht ohne mich. Nein. Sie sagt, sie kann nicht ohne mich. Ohne mich, ja. Ohne mich, ja.
Contra K. Gringo calls Contra K champion.
Intensified across the border between Israel and Gaza, and the violence shows no signs of letting up.
Family and friends in Israel.
She's part of a group called the Canadian Association of Jews and Muslims, both communities working together to make sure there's peace at home during an unstable time half a world away.
I would say it is a somber turning towards one another, but it is a turning towards one another.
We hope and pray for the peace and blessings of that everybody can enjoy.
Kamel Karamali, Global News.
And a remarkable story for you tonight involving a man in distress and the Toronto police officers who risked everything to save his life. A rescue that caught the attention of the mayor and the police chief. Catherine McDonald shows us how it all unfolded.
What happened?
This was the scene just after 6 a.m. when police were called to the Roehampton Hotel, which was being used as a homeless shelter during the pandemic.
I just saw him hanging.
I saw the gentleman, he was dangling from the upper floor.
When officers arrived at the hotel, they found a man in crisis hanging out of an 8th floor window, being held by on-site security. Chief James Raymer said in a tweet, the two police officers took over, holding the man in distress for 12 minutes. Witnesses who were woken by the commotion say they were stunned.
They were going to that next level to make sure he was safe. They were straddling the bottom of the windowsill, and then just kind of went that extra mile.
Some people are still too shaken up by what they saw. One man tells me off camera, people were standing here in the parking lot below, urging the man not to jump.
The man was finally rescued by breaking windows in the unit below. He was pulled to safety. Raymer says the man was taken to hospital and is now getting the help he needs.
I'm pretty much glad to know that nothing happened. Like, otherwise my day would have been ruined, and that memory will be.
I'm a child witness to suicide.
Witnesses tell Global News that the officers emerged from the Roehampton Hotel after the successful rescue with cuts on their arms and hands from the broken glass. The chief tweeted that the officers involved were treated for minor injuries and released from hospital. Raymer went on to say, all Toronto police officers are trained for dynamic emergency calls to save lives. I'm extremely proud of their bravery. In a tweet, Mayor John Tory writes, strength, courage, professionalism, and compassion in plain view with this distressing incident. These are the qualities the men and women of the Toronto Police display every day. The rescue comes after a number of high-profile mental health calls that generated criticism towards police. Those who witnessed today's rescue is something they will never forget.
Obviously in some distress, and hopefully he can get the help to resolve those issues.
Catherine McDonald, Global News.
A beautiful shot from our harbor cam, the sun glistening off the lake. Another 2 hours of sunlight as the sun sets just after 8:30. I'll show you how long this weather pattern lasts in your full forecast just ahead.
Right, we had frost last week, but it's May.
It's about time for a refresh. Regain momentum.
Fuck off.
Reconnect with your customers. Reach new ones.
Play 69. Music.
Schreib einen Text, doch jeder sagt auf dir ein bisschen. Ich kann nicht hoffen, jetzt.
So now you can bring the same cleaning.
Unfortunately for all these artists, I'm going like strictly on the instrumentals. I have no fucking idea. Oh, this one's called Paranoia. Okay, well, Paranoia 2. What was Paranoia 1? Never. 2 tracks in a row called Friend, but by completely different artists.
Thank you for listening to KCRW. Right? You're tuning in during our spring fundraiser, KCRW's Drive to the Future. We're all looking forward to a better, brighter tomorrow. Help secure KCRW's place in the future we all share. Donate now at kcrw.com/give. And thank you.
Really pick it up back from where we left off. Or we're going to start like back over again.
.com. For Windows.
Parity. Even though ICE now supports their green card applications,
remember the IP address, and I don't have to hear that message every time.
And they're still waiting on immigration paperwork to be processed to get their work permits and driver's licenses back.
I've got the software on this box here. I haven't had time to fuck around with it because there's so much fucking problem.
I remember Juanita went to the ATM machine and she forgot how to use the card.
I did. Other things lapsed too. Juanita lost science credits for the advanced nursing degree she'd been working on.
Yeah, of course, those expired. One of my licenses also expired.
So they're getting by the same way they did when in Sanctuary, holding fundraisers. They used to cook Jamaican food for the events, and then, during the pandemic, that turned into takeout meals. COVID-19 is another obstacle in their return to normalcy. Their youngest, Timmy, was 12 when they moved into Sanctuary. Now he's 15 and a head taller. He's wrapping up his 9th grade year virtually, which he says has been tough.
It's kind of hard in the beginning, especially since it's my first year like in high school, but I'm getting
through coffee.
It's like smooth, that's the vibe.
Mein Weg ist der von Gott. Links-Rechts-Politik, ich sehe nicht, die gerade ins Licht. Mein Weg ist der von Gott. Stellt sich in Wasserform nicht, bleibt wie immer auf dem Wand nicht. Mein Weg ist der von Gott. Interesse führt nicht, immer weiter ins Licht. Keine Angst vor dem Krieg, nein, so war ich Gott lebt. Mein Weg ist der von Gott.
Kennen Sie das Weidemilchgeheimnis unserer Schwarzwaldmilch? Entspannte Kühe, frische Schwarzwälder Luft, saftig grüne Weiden und zufriedene Bauern.
Wir Bauern lieben den Schwarzwald und das, was wir tun. Manche sagen, da schmeckt man.
Die frische Weidemilch von Schwarzwaldmilch. Schwarzwaldmilch, erfrischend echt.
Sookie, Grim 104, you only die once. People are hardcore. I gotta smoke another joint. Hold on. We'll check it.
Mostly we're looking at warm conditions.
Egal wie viel man noch tut, dann sind wir davon leeres Versprechen. Ja, die Zukunft übertreibt ihre Rolle. Firma, Unendlichkeit kann noch niemand wollen. Niemals. Stell dir doch vor, da ist kein Ende in sich. Ich überwinde meine Jugend, ich verschwende sie nicht. Millennial soll wissen, was das für ein Fleisch sei. Eine dumme Frage tut, als wäre sie ein Highlight. Keine Ahnung, wie lange diese Scheiße noch dauert. Ich weiß, zu schlafen ist wie tot sein, nur ohne die Trauer. Only you, you only die at the top. You only die once. 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 You only die once.
Meine Freunde nennen mich Moritz, alle anderen nennen mich Kim, aber keiner von ihnen weiß von der Hölle in mir. Hier wird ewige Verdammnis noch ganz anders definiert, in einer Erstsemester-Regel über Krieg zu diskutieren. Meine Hölle wiederholt sich, ist ein Loop, sitzt im Krankenhaus in Holland und weiß, da wird nicht alles gut. Meine Hölle läuft im Kreis, eine Schleife. Mama geht ans Telefon, das Fleisch und das Scheiße. Und in meiner Hölle gibt es weder Pech und Schwefel. Dafür neue Sachen, du altes Gleichzeitig siehst du den Industriegespräch. Es gibt keine Flammen, Folter und den Dreizack in den Bauch. Doch die neue tote Strecke über Cloud, der Tod ist auch keine aufgeblähten Kadaver, Lava, ödes Karstadt, aber Splitter, Prominenz, Geltungsdrang, Tata, meine Hölle ist in mir, solange ich lebe und mein Himmel in der Schwert in der Leere.
You only die once. You only die once. You only die once.
Tangerine starts you off with an easy online application.
Berlin, schwing mit dir hoch, Babe. Ich meine Richtung Paradies. Bist du Jasmin, dann ist Mika jetzt ein Aladdin. Komm, Baby, komm, Baby, komm. Wir tanzen auf den Song, Song. Baby, bitte komm, bitte komm, bitte komm. Wir tanzen auf den Song, Song. Baby, bitte komm, Baby, bitte komm. Der Koffer ist nicht mit dir und schöne Bonner hoch, du bist gesund. Millionen sind voll, du bist die One. Sowas von perfekt, ohne nicht komplett. Ich fühle mich alleine, doch bist du dann da, kraft mein Herz stark.
This is paranoid.
At OMG.ca. Vashon Insurance Group presents Did You Know?
Wave smell.
Die ganze Stadt weiß,
Dirty cops wanna spread. Oh, you motherfuckers. Okay. All right. I'm putting cases on all you bitches. Huh? You think you can do this shit? You'll never see the light of day. Don't fuck you think you fucking with. I'm the police. I run shit. The whole neighborhood screaming out dirty cops. Cause they up to no good. Fucking dirty cops. Wanna slam me on the hood. Dirty cops. Try to rob me for my race, but I know my rights. I know. The whole neighborhood screaming out dirty cops. Cause they up to no good. Fucking dirty cops. Wanna slam me on the hood. Dirty cops. Try to rob me for my rights, but I know my rights. I know. I'm on the block with a couple racks on me. Dirty cop try to put a couple backs on me. Use this nice stick to fucking beat the black off me. Then I ran, fuck the maidens for this black coffee. Better back the fuck off me. I know my rights. Said the kid had a gun, nigga, know that sight. Try to throw me on the ground on the cold last night. For fuck a dirty cop, you know that's right. They only make like 23 an hour at the Chinese spot. Always eating sweet and sour. That's where you find the cops. And I pursue late night trying to find a prostitute. The whole neighborhood screaming out dirty cops. Cause they up to no good. Fucking dirty cops. Wanna slam me on the hood. Dirty cops. Try to rob me for my rights, but I know my rights. I know my rights. I know. King Kong ain't got shit on me. I'm the man up in this bitch. Dirty cops is good if you pay them all. Cause they could kill a nigga and they won't even lay them off. Trying to plant drugs so they can send away them all. Keep the money coming in, it's like straight it off. Cause you see, police won't bug a nigga. Won't fuck with me, but put the drugs on another nigga. Or miss a payment and find your ass up the river. Keep my dirty cops paid off like what up, my nigga. If it's their word against yours, they get it. Now you got a felony in a court case schedule. Get a good lawyer, my niggas, what you better do. Should've paid the dirty cop, now you in federal. The whole neighborhood screaming out dirty cops. Cause they up to no good, fucking dirty cops. Wanna slam me on the hood, dirty cops. Try to rob me for my rights, but I know my rights. I know.
pick up and not committing these crimes. Giving us time for living in life, for living in life. Figure you niggas perverts out when you see minority give us some shots. You see.
And why should we trust the government that got us into this mess to get us out of it?
And there's always time to put us
The problem is my melanin darker than what you peddling. Planting evidence to veto your quota embellishments. You killing be free, but we get consecutive sentences. Shit will get settled quick if you take off your emblem and get knocked out. Your jaw will get popped out. Kick you off balance, miss a shot and get boxed out. Power tripping cause you was bullied when you was a kid. You should be doing this for all the ruthless shit that you did, nigga. It's flip the whole neighborhood. Screaming out dirty cops, cause they up to no good, fucking dirty cops. Wanna slam me on the hood, dirty cops. Try to rob me for my rights, but I know my rights, I know my rights, I know my rights, I know my rights.
Punk ass, bitch ass, crooked ass cop.
Nobody wants to know my
At risk. I think yesterday's number was 805, and that's not good. As much as we're seeing a decline, which is good, everyone is moving forward. We're getting the vaccines into people's arms. But we just can't risk it. Just hang in there we aren't asking a lot.
Actually, you are.
Hier heute ein Riesending, das ist die Party des Jahres, ja, das sagt mir mein Instinkt. Heute sind alle dabei, es haben sich ja alle getroffen. Wir feiern bis zum Abwinken, hier wird Konfetti geschossen. Hebt die Hände in die Luft und macht die ganze Nacht Kraft, damit auch jeder Partymuffel geht, weil er abkackt. Pass du ab, hast du verkackt, denn die Party geht erst los, wenn die Bässe richtig pumpen bis in jeden Hinterhof. Das ist Apfelmusik, bei uns da brennt jeder Club, es wird gefeiert wie noch nie, streckt die Hände in die Luft, hey, hey, das geht ab, wir feiern die ganze Nacht, die ganze Nacht, das geht ab, wir feiern die ganze Nacht, die ganze Nacht, das geht ab, wir feiern die ganze Nacht, die ganze Nacht, das geht ab. Wir feiern die ganze Nacht, die ganze Nacht. Wir nicht alleine heute.
Actually put an injunction against opening the schools. I just need the labor leaders to sit down with the docs and come up with a solution.
Okay. Last I heard, decisions were being made on medical expertise, not union threats, right? They don't run the show. They should be. Parents need clarity, and kids need hope. And right now, we've got neither. Neither.
You can't keep telling kids, yeah,
and
tomorrow we're going to do this. And tomorrow comes, no, we're not doing that. We're doing something else. You can't do that every fucking day.
But I don't even think these conversations are happening. It's just, we'll see, we'll talk, whatever. But the unions should not really have a say in this. Sorry. What is clear, I think, from today, Premier Ford is no longer besties with the Prime Minister. You got both sides slinging mud at each other over border restrictions, because you've got on one side Ford blaming Trudeau for letting the variants in, and then Trudeau is playing victim to the attacks because, well, he's just here to help everybody, right? And the reality is this: the Trudeau government did totally drop the ball and let the variants in with very sloppy border restrictions. We know this. And the quarantine, hotel break, all these outbreaks, that's their game, and they've been sloppy on it. And Ford, who has, yes, been asking for this to be fixed since December at least, he's using this issue now to deflect from a lot of his own failures. So welcome to the blurred lines of a pandemic that has now been completely mired in politics, and a lot of it is being played. Which then takes us into the very clear ethical lines that were again breached by the Trudeau government. just not specifically by our ethically challenged Prime Minister, who's likely got a big old Cheshire Cat grin today because it seems, again, he'll get away with his shady ways. And what really would have been a political disaster for a guy who's so desperate to get to the polls while the numbers are playing his way. So what did we learn? We learned that the Ethics Commissioner, Marion Dion, how long did it take? How many months did this take? He ruled that while there may be a perception of conflict of interest, it didn't meet the criteria when it came to Trudeau, despite the fact that his family was paid hundreds of thousands of dollars by the charity, and that there's a very well-documented friendship with Trudeau and the Kielderberger boys. And yet, despite all the appearances that we in this cozy relationship, the ethics commissioner apparently found no such friendship existed, which means I don't think he opened his eyes. What he did find is that Bill Morneau violated 3 sections of the Ethics Act, and that's not his first ethics violation. So what did he fail? It would include failing to recuse himself from the process and giving preferential treatment to the Kielderbergers, awarding the sole source volunteer grant that would have been $900 million. And when you really think about it, it's a terrible look for the finance minister of a G7 nation, right? And make no mistake, there are 50 shades of gray here. Because at the time of this mess, when you look back, Trudeau was blaming the public service. Remember, it was their decision to give this charity this contract. His government didn't have anything to do with a sole source contract. Well, clearly it did. Because his top minister was playing fast and loose with the rules, peddling his influence to give a very close friend hundreds of millions of dollars in grants that Dion ruled both we and the Kielderbergers would have gained from. So they had unfettered access to Bill Morneau's office, a finance minister, and got preferential treatment. That's what the ruling said. And so Trudeau may have skated this time, but his government indeed crossed a line.
Oh, dear.
Mr. Trudeau did admit in the WE scandal he had a perceived conflict of interest. He broke the public trust. He said that himself. He's been found guilty twice previously of violating federal ethics rules as Prime Minister. Multiple ministers also found, the finance minister, former found guilty today, who's already left office. Canadians are tired. Canadians are frustrated by the culture of entitlement and corruption that surrounds the Trudeau government.
It's Trudeau.
So now Morneau's under the bus, and Trudeau claimed he never did anything wrong. Well, like the last 2 times, you got to read between the lines now, because the commissioner says
I want to buy an old Greyhound bus and start running
break
Uber.
the rules of the law, but that does not mean the optics don't look shady as hell. Because
we'll put plexiglass shields in between each row of seats.
It'll get very political, and now his talking points will change. I didn't do anything.
Well, ventilation running all the time.
But you were found guilty 2 other times.
Some sort of indicator for that.
It'll be interesting how this thing plays out. Nonetheless, I don't think
we'll spend like 10 grand on a fancy digital display just so it'll say fan status on over and over today.
Very busy show for you today. We will talk with Michelle Rempel-Garner about AstraZeneca second dose shots. She's trying to find out when and if those who go.
I'm sorry, did you say something important? No.
Outdoor-Bekleidung für echte Männer. Jede Jahreszeit und jedes Wetter. Herrenoutdoor.de bietet dir preiswerte Bekleidung zum Wohlfühlen. Nur echte Männer bestellen unter herrenoutdoor.de. Herrenoutdoor.de, der Online-Shop für echte Männer. Jetzt bestellen.
Show propaganda to make Israel look bad, and you can just see the political mudslinging all over the place. Israel bad.
Come on, Chug, you can do it. In about 2 minutes, a very loud train's got to come by Belgium, lots of smoke.
We'll check in with the doctor because the ICU numbers are heading in the right way and cases are going down. But again, why are we shut down until June 2nd? And is there anything opening up? Nah, nothing, nada. And then you got the Premier and the Prime Minister. One is selling 2-dose summer. I think people just want.
What is a 2-dose summer? What are you talking about?
We'll talk after this. Stay with us here on Point.
Like every time I take
for you.
drugs, I should double it up. Like, what are you talking about?
And now it's time to go out.
I swear they're giving us like outright. It's not even subliminal. like messages to go sell drugs, like from the youngest age up here, like every type of advertising and little thing. I'm getting disappointed in everything. Oh dear, I ate a muffin and now my belt is too tight. That is not a good sign. It's disappointing. I swear it's so loud and it doesn't sound like my blood out there.
And mama know she didn't raise no quitter.
Yeah. The fuck was that sound? What was an aerosol can of some kind?
Red tick, we slim, we out here. Don't get close, nigga.
We the critics, the shooters behind me. These the white lights, and these the 990s.
So don't sleep, no, nigga, we are what? Don't matter who it is, bound to get the job done. We the critics, got the shooters behind me.
Chug, who is Miss Monsieur Conductor? George Carlin.
The white lights, and these the 990s. So don't sleep, nigga, we are what? Don't matter who it is, bound to get the job done. On the same stage, running with the same click. Never gonna change, no, nigga, only change hoes. And the cool, but only if it's fucking up. Play some aim and niggas above the button. Fucking hard in the paint, no patch of fucking up. Repatch a flip, that to get our shit up. Every other option is a stick up. Never a 9 to 5, cause I ain't got no day job. From the slums, little homie. When we play hard, if you don't wanna see the 30-30 when it sprays hard, 22 to walk around 3/8 for the beat, the 40 to lick them down, the max for the YouTube. Heard niggas saying, but they wanna make tracks with us. Before that, didn't even crack to us. Going hard in the booth, this a takeover. Hard in the ground into your face, that's a makeover. 2-5 or a Q, the rest profit. Hustlers, when I say won't sleep till I knock it. And don't push me, cause I ain't in the talking. 12-year-old fool, so I ain't scared if you got it. God, is it me you comparing to? I ain't finished my fair share yet, but that air them just started. And I ain't talking about no drum shot, brush them off, go top. You know the cold heroin tracks, didn't think I was capable. 4-5 pipe on my mind, traceable. Didn't think I was capable. 4-5 pipe on my mind, it isn't traceable. You niggas gon' ride something like a flat tire. Feel the fire at your back, it will be backfire. Cause my gas the same size as a blow dryer. Never true in your raps, just some damn lies. A great job, make them spit through the wire. And you don't supply shit, you a buyer. I'm the king of gang rap, call me sire. That's hate, for privately you rate and admire. Your rubber grip tight, no pliers. I gotta take you out, call it quits or retire. You gone, the fourth room down, fifth lift them up. Bells don't leave shouts, so I'm switching up. Be something like a bus driver still picking up. Got your hands in your pocket, nigga, stick them out. I'm a projects, money's no objects. So we finger fuck max and we contract. Slide in, slide out, duck when we ride out. Down go, I got rounds that you don't count. You're standing up till I tell them sit down. Stomach on the ground, hands behind your back and you're blowing over. When I'm digging in your pants, see me up in your grip. Out for the rest. He said, get the weed, need the cash. What? I'ma do him dirty, mad max. Sure, niggas get back. Bitches get snapped and get smacked face down when I'm breaking her back. Yo, we got metal like a rap, made a name in rap. I ain't setting it for trap. Yo, I'ma need me a back of that C-O-L-T. Carved in my rap, still unstolen. Stereo scratch on my actions. Suck the madness, I'm reeling up, get it gone. Man said they can't go sleep like I don't got a night show. Send your aim class, didn't see prom, now run up on them close. I ain't doing wrong, but I'm clear blood strong till it jumps on my palm. And it tiny changes and no to me arms are just.
That was an interesting sounding train.
Sicker than stars, I ain't famous, but I'm a whole star. I'll snap, pop like camera, I'll snap, run up, just hide when I let up. Run 9 in the mask, 9 in the act, 9 with the strap to your man's vision black. With the phone dog and hot snap, on the G's for YGs, scroll clap, we clap, do you come and try me? 70s and 90s, been moving grimy, blood rush till they talk to the ivy. 4 or 5 will stretch you, and they think it's drunk, until they end up on the stretcher, better get a coffin. Yo, Christians, so we ain't in a no long talking. Money overflow back.
I really want to know if you've been given the AstraZeneca is clarity. When and will the second dose be available?
Never. Never. Because you're all going to die.
Shot.
Sorry.
Endless summer. Bro.
Guarantee he hit him up. Take a nigga slut. Once I get busy with these OGs screaming outside, outside all the police. Fucked up when I nipped 1.5 a beast. Good to see everybody this motherfucker tonight. You know why we here?
Why we here?
You know what we came to do.
No idea.
When I go fuck up, you better fuck back. Fuck. See what you really think is up, niggas.
I can't take that right now.
They said all like a nigga to my gang. They got like a nigga cause they on the same thing. If a nigga run up, then that shit go bang bang. If a nigga run up, then we never break bang.
I promise you will be strong.
Don't know, don't get close to them two lanes.
No! Give me that shit just up the forehead and back one.
Oh dear.
The choice whether they feel safe having a second dose is beautiful.
Finest moment. I mean, I recall when I was in the field position that I was saying, good God, if COVID's worse than this, I do not want COVID, but I just, it better run away the next.
For the devil. They've got a point. Stupefy you. Music will stupefy you. Music will stupefy you.
Yo, this is Young Lava. We love hip hop.
Jump in the water, need that flow, need that flow.
One, two, one, two, one, two, one, two.
Where are you? Hey, there you are. How does it feel to know you only have a few more seconds left to live?
Check it, I stay dwelled up, pockets rolled up, from banks I held up. Plenty bitch ass niggas, big L stuff. I never catch cold feet when I hold heat. We roll deep in a triple black dark tinted OG. I catch a bag 3 o'clock in the morning, on the block all alone, and put a Glock through his dome. Tell him give it up quick, you get wit. Go try to get slick, or I'ma let this 4/5 spit and leave your shit split. Frick, it ain't nothing decent about me. A true thug for real, you can ask the priest about me. A rap junkie, don't try to play me like some flunky. Jews be chunky, pockets lumpy, attitudes grumpy. Mad niggas be frontin' a lot, poppin' mad shit, trying to be something they not. No faggot ass better stick to dancing. Don't even look at me, I might break your jaw just for glancing. That's right, in 97 Harlem kids is blowing, and we don't trick, we'll let a bitch starve till her ribs are showing. Look,
the divine mastermind, I turn nickels to dimes, authentic, genuine, that's out to shine. The cool cat, the true Mac, with smooth rap. Chickens be like, who that? I be doing my thing, kid. Get front and I'm beyond that. I roll with brothers ready for combat. All for eye-to-eye contact with skills, G. Yo, it's ill, C for real, B. Ain't no barbecue, niggas better stop trying to grill me. Sin dead styles of the essence. Got niggas stressing my style, feels like caresses, no question. Tough type, the clutch mic, the positive upright. I'm now, I don't give a fuck type. Expose the facts, you know that has to go to last astrological. Like the signs in the zodiac, the rap truth out the stack loop. Word up, my style's tighter than a fat bitch, and the capsule surprise you. It's not why I see the side me when I operate. Smooth sailing like Ron Isley. Gotta do my thing, word up. Beg your pardon, time to balance. Gotta skate like trying hard.
We're not here to when people have a viral infection. Nobody is going to tolerate anybody walking around sneezing in Costco or or in the workplace anymore. We're not going to see people coming in and toughing it out with a fever. Going
screaming
to work.
and yelling in the
So
street, chasing people,
exactly
no one's noticing.
if you're sick, put a mask on or you're a social pariah. And that's the way it probably should have been always. So I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, we haven't had a cold all year, which is kind of nice. Allergies, another story, but not having a cold is a good thing. All right, doctor, appreciate your time always, and have a good night.
Pleasure, talk soon.
Dr. David Jacobs, always generous with his time. I'm going to open up the phone lines. Would love to hear from you on what the Ford government announced. I don't think it's any surprise that the stay-at-home order has been extended another 2 weeks to the 2nd of June. But that means, again, May 2-4 plans are being canceled, told to tone down. And so are you going to play by the rules, stay at home? Or have you reached that point where you're saying, screw it, I'm doing me. You do you, boo. 416-870-6400 or 888-225-TALK. Is the Premier being reasonable, or do you think people are just done with it? We'll do that next. Stay with us on Point. Your news at the top of the hour here on Global News Radio.
What do guests think of Tim's new vanilla cream cold brew coffee?
It's like smooth.
Where are you?
For $32. Now some people pay hundreds of dollars for her carvings. She believes anybody.
Willst du mit mir Drogen nehmen? Da wird es rote Rosen regnen. Ich hab dir das so gesehen. Willst du mit mir Drogen nehmen? Komm, wir gehen zusammen fast zusammen. Komm, wir gehen zusammen fast zusammen. Komm, wir gehen zusammen fast zusammen.
Then price yours and adventure on in all weather.
NPR News.
Support for NPR.
Library stocked with text by Russian authors that can be accessed by cell phone.
What? Where are we going with this?
But the expansion of Moscow's metro system has also generated criticism.
Don't you guys melt the snow right off the road?
This protest is in opposition to the expansion of the metro system. People here are sad to see the green space overtaken by a metro line. They believe the restructuring of Moscow by its current mayor is the wrong way to go. They feel the modern Moscow, including the new metro lines, isn't theirs. This view is shared by local politician Yasmin Fakhmi.
Does that count as civil unrest?
Moscow isn't getting better or more beautiful. The city is destroying itself and losing its uniqueness.
Yasmin and other opponents say there's no reason for a station here, because the district already has enough public transit. Beyond that, they say the metro line is much too shallow and threatens the foundations of old buildings.
How does it work? Fast. That means without inspections or expert reports. We've discovered that expert reports are bought and sold. Their findings aren't reliable. They're just a formality. They're reports without a real foundation.
Sounds like here.
In European democracies, the speed metro was built would be unimaginable.
Because Russia's an authoritarian regime, many decisions can simply be carried out from above without considering public opinion. That, of course, makes things move more quickly. The state decides and the state does it. But it often leads to mistakes when we don't ask the public what they think. When they don't understand why, they protest.
Many Moscow residents has the biggest car-sharing fleet in Europe, 6 companies and 26,000 cars. With these new sustainable transit options, Moscow hopes to get the traffic pollution under control.
We're getting pinged by crazy or bad data.
And that's it for this edition of Global 3000. If you have any comments on today's show, do email us at global3000@dw.com. Until next time, it's bye-bye and take care.
Thursday, Friday. It's Friday, there's no major. It's Thursday. Yeah, keep pinging around. He's incredibly creative. Every hour.
During the inspection, he listened to introductions to the construction,
management and operation of the middle route of the water diversion project and the equalization of the water source region. He also learned about the resettlement of people relocated because of the project and measures to develop specialty industries and boost the incomes of resettled residents.
Yes, we know. I called you out 2 fucking minutes ago for this. You're incredibly
I
slow.
learned Chinese with no space. Chinese Studio. Let language bring us together.
87 billion yuan, were about $61.5 billion during this period. The ministry says FDI volume also represents an increase of 30% of the same period in 2019. The country's service sector attracted about 313 billion yuan of FDI from January to April, up about 47% from last year. The figure accounts for the lion's share of the country's total FDI received in the first 4 months of the year. Meantime, FDI from economies linked to the Belt and Road Initiative grew by about 63%, and the ASEAN grew by 65%. A spokesperson for China's Ministry of Commerce says that China-U.S. economic and trade relations are mutually beneficial in nature. The spokesperson called on China and the United States to address each other's legitimate concerns through dialogue and consultation on the basis of mutual respect and equality. The remarks came after U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai said she expects to meet Chinese trade officials in the near term. The Drugs Controller General of India has approved Phase 2 and 3 Covaxin trials on children aged from 2 to 18. The country's health ministry says the national regulator gave the green light to manufacture Bharat Biotech after a careful examination. The clinical trials are expected to involve more than 500 healthy participants, with 2 doses of the vaccine given to them 28 days apart.
Dozens have tested positive and have been isolated in a school now shabbily converted into a quarantine center. Experts are convinced it's now a rural pandemic. About 2/3 of India's population resides here. A priest who's been carrying out last rites in India's most populous state of Uttar Pradesh is seeing more dead bodies being cremated than ever before.
For the past few days, we've been seeing bodies burning here day and night. In that river right behind these steps, bodies have been washing up for the past few days. Nobody has claimed them.
Cremation grounds are full and so are burial sites. Even wood for burning bodies is in short supply. Local reports say family members unable to cremate their dead are disposing of the bodies in the river Ganga, considered holy by many Hindus. Dozens of corpses are now washing up on its banks, but authorities have been reluctant to categorize them as COVID-related deaths. Experts say this crisis could have been averted. Global health researcher Anand Pan blames the government for being ill-prepared.
We've been caught wanting on a lot of our response to the pandemic, which shows that, again, the government as the primary responsible authority in preparing for pandemic response has not done enough.
Massive political and religious gatherings along with a double mutant variant, the B1617, resulted in the second wave that has already infected millions and killed tens of thousands just in the past 2 months. Vaccines, a crucial element in India's fight against the pandemic, is also in short supply. The government insists that it's following scientific advice. And even though the second wave is more damaging than they had anticipated, India is faring better than many nations for the size of its population. But experts warn that due to poor medical infrastructure, especially in the rural areas, the true extent of the pandemic may never be known. For the Beijing Hour, I'm Ishan Garg in New Delhi.
Health experts expect India to be able to mass produce and roll out vaccines by the end of July. Professor Sanjeeva Srivastava is with the Indian Institute of Technology in Mumbai. He says the country is making progress in the fight thanks to international support and increased public awareness.
But hoping that maybe in a month or so, situation improves here for the second wave. And while we are already getting lots of vaccine production getting boosted up, probably the mass production may happen by June end and July.
Dr. Alice Tan from South
in China's growing media presence across the world. The French army chief tells soldiers to quit over the civil war letter. You're listening to World Today, a news program with a different perspective. I'm Diana in Beijing. In the coming hour, we'll bring you in-depth analysis of this news and other stories we've been following. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching World Today. A later-stage human trial of the first mRNA COVID-19 vaccine candidate developed in China using the same technology as the Pfizer and Moderna jabs will begin in Mexico later this month. Mexican authorities said the phase 3 trial of the vaccine made by China's Volvax biotechnology would start on May 30th. Mexico has already approved for emergency use and received doses of China's Sinovac and CanSino vaccines, and are also expecting to receive doses of the Sinopharm shots. So for more on this, let's bring in Professor Zha Daojun, School of International Studies at Peking University. Thanks for joining us, Professor Zha.
My pleasure.
So this is China's first mRNA vaccine. What does it mean for China to master this technology?
Well, I was just reading the story in the Financial Times about this. If somehow people today believe that, the mRNA technology is advanced, it represents breakthrough or progress. But I did read literature that says there are some 14, at least 14, standard ways or acceptably safe ways for making vaccines. Let me just put it that way. I think it's generally understood at this point of time that this technology, this methodology is representing progress.
Mm-hmm. Then why choose to collaborate with Mexico on this mRNA approach?
Well, Mexico is actually a key, the major, should I say, actor in the global vaccine trade in terms of components. If you look at data that's produced by OECD, Mexico is among the top exporters of a number of ingredients, including adjuvants, cold chain products,
adjuvant-free,
as well as things like needles and syringes, because it's close to the United States. And on top of that, you have a history of collaboration between Chinese and Mexican and other Latin American specialists doing the basic healthcare, doing the basic research. I think it's more capacity-based.
Chinese companies have made agreements with Russia to manufacture more than 260 million doses of Russia's Sputnik V vaccine. So to what extent can cooperation between China and Russia help developing countries with vaccination?
Well, the collaboration receives a lot of attention, partly because, China and Russia, people relate this to geopolitics. And as you just mentioned, people also don't expect that this Russian vaccine or Chinese vaccines, not for whatever sake, get into a developed country. I don't know what to make out of that kind of sentiment. It's not really very constructive, but that's a reality. Somehow you have this assumption of a hierarchy of a division of labor. But for now, I think the Chinese and Russians are doing the right thing of saying, well, let's just deal with the reality and come up with as many vaccines as possible to save life.
So producing 260 million doses of Russia's vaccine, and China also expects to produce more than 3 billion vaccine doses this year. So will China's vaccine production capacity meet their requirements?
Oh, come on. You have so many producers and so many different varieties of vaccines from different. I don't think China somehow that heavy share of the duty on the shoulders of Chinese vaccine producers. At the end of the day, it's making a vaccine is like making an airplane. You need a prior order and sometimes down payment for the actual production to take place.
I think it depends on what countries actually choose to sign what kind of contracts with China or Russia or any other producer for that matter to see. And it's a situation that constantly evolves.
A recent article from CNN says China and Russia want to vaccinate the developing world before the West. Without China and Russia's vaccines, how long do you think will it take for the West and vaccine-hoarding nations to help developing countries with vaccines?
Well, I don't really quite like the division as you just quoted from CNN or one other major Western or international media outlets, but that's the reality. But then don't underestimate, though, the United States is already talking about 60 million doses of these vaccines. You had the promise of collaboration among the United States, Australia, Japan, and India. Of course, India at this point of time in a difficult situation. But again, let's really put the effectiveness of vaccine, let's really put the matching of capacities, that let's say put the competition against time of getting the vaccines to the needy population ahead of other considerations. I think that's probably a better way of thinking about the so-called competition between so-called China and Russia on one side and the so-called West on the other side. I don't think that division is very healthy at all. It's not actually very human.
Some media, foreign media, have been spreading misrepresentations by quoting incomplete data and groundless claims to question Chinese vaccine safety and efficacy. But a recent report from Indonesia, China's Sinovac shot has been highly effective in the real-world study. It tracked 128,290 health workers in capital city of Indonesia and from January to March, and found that vaccine protected 98% of them from death and 96% from hospitalization.
Wait, 2% died? Whoa.
7 days after the second dose. So what do you make of the contrast?
Well, the media is a, should I say, complex, life.
It's a little much, huh?
1.5 years. In the past several years, recently my offspring have been illegally hunted for their tusks, leaving me.
You know what I feel like? We're fighting with a virus, an invisible virus, and there is no way, if I knew I'm going to fight with somebody and I can get myself stronger and fight back and win the battle, but this one you cannot win. You just have to follow the rules and the science and the doctors, what they're saying, and eventually we're going to, pass this problem. But some people, they're getting angry with everybody because they're thinking that some people are intentionally doing this. Nobody's doing this intentionally. It's because we are victim of this virus, and this is a pandemic, and virus doesn't give a damn about you. It's gonna kill you if don't follow.
So I said the virus doesn't
Well, I
give a
appreciate
fuck.
your thought, Joe from Caledon, and
They kept
the
switching to
virus
that.
is a real thing. I think what most people are fed up with is doing their part and watching a bunch of politicians continually make mistakes, and there have been plenty of mistakes. I'm pretty hard on Doug Ford, but the provinces have had to do all the heavy lifting. The federal government, they're the one who dropped the ball way back in January of 2020. In fact, actually, December, they were getting warned about this thing, and they all twiddled their thumbs like, don't worry, we're prepared. Don't worry, we've got it. It's low risk, they said, low risk. Don't need masks. It's all low risk. Oh, it's here. Oh, it's here? Oh. Never mind. We'll come up with a plan. And they didn't. And I think that's why there's so much resentment. Let's go to Tampa. Hello there, Ian from Tampa.
Alex, how are you?
How's the weather?
Now, forget about it. I'm not going to make you mad. 90 degrees. Okay, I'm
all right.
Cool. I love
I resent you more. I would resent you more if it was not spring, but we are starting to get nice sunshine here. So it's good to have a listen.
90. I listen to you every night. I love you. You're the voice of reason. I just
don't tell my husband that.
I just need to know why I've been playing tennis at the country club for 7 months without a mask and no problems. Why?
Yeah, I've got tennis courts right out back of my house. It's a club. I'm not a member because I'm a terrible player, but they can't play, and I don't get it either. I don't. That's like how much more distance do you have to be?
I don't pay any more money, so it's normal fees. So I'm not really understanding this. This is times the golfers are wanting they.
Well, I mean, as a journalist, I mean, being stationed overseas for more than a decade, I think that's actually a very positive sign, because we all know sort of for decades and a decade, the global media being primarily dominated by the Western news outlets, and China's voice are not being heard. I mean, it's the imbalance is abhorring, I would say. It's not just for China, it's for other developing countries. I mean, how many African, Latin American media are represented on the international stage. So in that sense, I think that's a very positive move, I mean, towards a more balanced global media landscape. But you know, you are talking about the COVID environment. You know, we all know that China has been probably the most effective in controlling the pandemic. That's not what Chinese media say. That's recognized globally. If you talk to WHO officials and all the public health experts, I mean, the life going back to normal, the economy resumed a long time ago. So this is something that which was not a reality in Europe, in the United States. We all know how, you know, Trump actually screwed up the pandemic response. So this is just a fact. This is not media reporting, fabricating media, just reporting the facts. The other thing I would say that the Chinese media going global is just at the beginning stage. What we in China say, the first step of the long march. So we have a lot to learn. We have a lot to do. I mean, to catch up. I mean, to have a more balanced media landscape. It's like in the past, you go to a China seminar in the US and Europe, you don't have anyone from China. China is not represented. It doesn't make sense. So China now finally has a representation.
Mr. Chen, according to the report, that China's image had to become more positive, especially in the Europe, which scored 6.3 on a scale of 1.
Yahoo failed to do so. You're listening to the Beijing Hour. Coming up, experts say the structure of China's labor force will continue upgrading.
The Beijing.
Of course they're not. They're unwinnable situations. The problem is it always turns into politics. We can't open because they're not. It's not about the experts saying what's safe and what isn't safe. It's about posturing, gamesmanship, and that's why we're going to be in this mess. I'm sorry, next May 24th.
Oh, gosh. Bite your tongue, Rob. Thank you very much. Yeah, on that note, who knows where we'll be in and out of this. But I got to be honest, you know, you get the doctors on the science table, they all say different things. And it's tough. I don't envy Doug Ford. He has an impossible job. He can't please anybody. And the science table's no help because one guy says one thing, another gal says another thing. They all have their own opinions. And I think there are too many cooks in the kitchen on this thing. Bottom line, we didn't get vaccines in time. Oh, yeah. Bottom line, we didn't close the borders when this virus was an ocean away back in January 2020. We could have done lots of things. We had SARS to learn from, and we learned nothing. Thanks, guys, for all your calls. Appreciate it greatly. When we come back, we'll bring in our global talkers. We'll talk about a few things, including, yes, ethics violations. Prime Minister got by this time. Lucky guy. Must have horseshoes somewhere. But his former finance minister certainly got hit again. So we'll talk about that and the other day's stories in just a couple of minutes. Stay with us here. Alex Pearson, on point. This is Global News Radio.
Time now. Just shocking in the last few years. And also, unfortunately, with Canada, because of the Huawei's Meng Wanzhou case, the relationships has deteriorated. I think bilateral, mutual perception, I would say, become deteriorated. But, just remember the former U.S. politician, National Security Advisor, Brzezinski once said, most Americans have no idea of world affairs. So still we need more context, Unfortunately, the U.S. cracked on, exchanging institutions like Confucius Institution, making Americans having less access to knowing China. In a sense, they are easily manipulated. So some public opinion don't really show, make a lot of sense, I would say.
One interesting point I think worth of mentioning is that in some countries, China was seen as the source of the most accurate information about the COVID-19. Why do you think that is the case?
Again, I would mention that simply because China's super excellent performance in tackling the COVID-19. We all know every country had some missteps. Maybe you can all talk about how China could improve if you have had a crystal ball in the very beginning. But this is about a very totally unknown virus. But WHO, all the public health experts, China has provided the genome sequence very promptly. That's enabling other countries to do research, including leading to today's vaccine very quickly. China has always tackled the COVID-19 in a scientific way. There's nothing like the Trump or some actually European government, which politicize the virus, even the vaccines. So that's leading to a very poor response. I think China has been very genuine in, like providing consultation, conference call, sending medical team, PPE. It's like, the vaccine today. So it's like, how many people know that China provided 40 billion masks to the United States, so more than 100 each Americans. Western media doesn't want to report this.
Mm-hmm. We saw many China bashing reports from the Western media citing this report. It seems that the U.S.-led West is all out to push back against any positive views about China and China's influence. What do you make of this?
I think, it's about the U.S. Sort of indulgence in this big power rivalry, because the U.S. always want to protect its primacy, or I would say hegemony in the world, because finally there is a country called China is going to rival the United States economically, sometimes technologically, and maybe even militarily in the coming decades. So this is not tolerable for the United States. That's why it has been engaging, in such a malicious smear campaign, not just in recent years, for more than decades at least. We all know, people from Hillary Clinton to her successors, when they go to Africa, they keep bad-mouthing about China. Actually, Tony Blinken did the same recently in his meeting with African leaders. But ironically, he admitted that he didn't know very much about China's the dynamic of China's engagement in Africa, but they are instinctively just want to smear China. So this is the only politically correct way for U.S. politicians these days.
Coincidentally, Associated Press has published a piece on Tuesday entitled "Army of Fake Fans Boosts China's Messaging on Twitter," alleging that China is using the Western social media as a new front to shape global public opinion. As a big shot on Twitter with over 91,000 followers, let me ask you this. Are you a robot, or are your fans a robot placed by Chinese government?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I actually responded recently. Yeah, I'm just not a real Chinese journalist. I'm like a Noam Chomsky faking to be a Chinese journalist. I think this whole report, AP report, actually I know the reporter, the writer, she was based in Shanghai before, now relocated in Brussels. But, I have to say, nothing personal, but I think this is a very laughable report, because we all know that all of the maybe Chinese accounts combined would be the number of followers would be much less than Trump's one account, which is more than 80 million. you just say I'm like a sort of a kind of a big on Twitter, but I still have 90,000. I mean, that's wouldn't be called a big account among the Americans. Chinese have very little limited influence on Twitter. I think in itself, the report itself, it's
Weibo has 38 million users in the United States.
Do you want the Chinese to be represented on Twitter? I mean, it's not even 1%.
Can we get to this French Army thing, Civil War, and all that? Jesus
Western. I mean, you should not let.
Dave Bradley, I'll start with you because I know you're in the same situation. You got kids. I heard at the union. When did the unions get a say in this? Like they're not decision makers here. This is supposed to be up to the medical professionals, isn't it?
It is, but obviously they're protecting their union membership because the teachers have to be in the schools in close contact with kids. And they're worried about that. That's why originally the state of emergency was brought in. You remember the break after April? We're going to get as many teachers. We pushed the teachers to the front of the line for vaccinations. We're going to get as many teachers vaccinated as we possibly can because it's so important that kids are back at school. And then why we've sort of taken this tack today, it just sounds like we've ignored what happened in the last month that we've been resting à la maison. You know what I mean? It just seems a little bit strange that we put this big full court press on to get the teachers vaccinated. And now it's like, well, we can't do that because the teachers union is upset. What are they upset about? That they got pushed to the front of the line to get vaccines? It doesn't really make sense.
It doesn't have to make sense, Arlene. And frankly, I think it's time for some outside the box thinking. And there's no reason at low risk areas why kids in this weather now, at least for the last month, couldn't do stuff like, do the classes outside.
Absolutely. Some of the World Health Organization, CDC, have confirmed it is the aerosol that is a big spreader. They were reluctant. This has been part of it, the push and pull. But it really plays into exactly what we're talking about now. As you say, if it is small particles and, of course, sneezing and everything, it's not fomite, it's not the theater that we're getting from the hand sanitizer that I still smell if I think about it long enough. It is all those things. If you move things outside, it's why Florida, Texas, all those people are doing better because they spend more time outside. It's not some magical thing. We know this. It's one of the few areas where the doctors are mostly in agreement. Outside, don't share air. And I agree with you. Come on, if we can see those pictures of 1918 with kids in much colder weather than it is right now in May, outside, and I see you move those kids outside, they'll never forget it. You're right. They would love it.
Let's just do all the hospital work outside because that'll magically fix everything.
Let's go. I'm with you. Let's think outside the box. Meanwhile, the Premier and Prime Minister are going back and forth in this battle over border restrictions. And, the Ford government has been asking for a long time to tighten up the border since at least December. And the Prime Minister has, is adamant that they have been tough. But, this is now, the blame game starting. But here's what Premier Ford said about this.
I sit back and think, there's a problem. And he's not doing anything about it. Like, what gives? You want to protect Canadians? You want to protect Ontarians? You want to stop variants from coming in? When 90% of people with COVID has come in through the airports or the land borders. I'll tell you, these variants, as I always say, they didn't do the backstroke across the ocean or they didn't fall from Mars. They came in because our porous borders.
Yeah, so Dave, we've talked about it. Look, this may be a distraction tactic for the Premier, but they did come in through the borders. It only takes one person with one case, and then you've got the virus here. And we know because we report on it, whether it's outbreaks at the quarantine hotels or how many 88,000 people who got exemptions when they flew over the border. We know there are lots of loopholes.
Oh, and there is. I mean, half the problem, though, is that they didn't start testing for the variants of concern until after the fact. So this is blatantly a shiny nickel being flipped up in the air so everybody will look at that and not look at anything else. I mean, there have been issues at the provincial level that have not been addressed and should be. Not saying that the border has been perfect,
But the Mississauga mayor said recently, we can't close Pearson because that's where the vaccine shipments are coming in. So we can't just shut down the airport and say nobody can land a plane here because we still need commerce. We still need vaccines to come into the province. And so I think there needs to be some give and take. But yeah,
Okay, is this about the France Civil War thing? That's my real skin tone.
In France, the letter signed by people claiming to be active duty troops talked about a possible unrest in the country because of what they called concessions to Islamism by French President Emmanuel Macron. So what's going on in the war? Here from France, Associate Professor and Department Coordinator of Economics and Decision Sciences Department at HEC Paris. Thanks for joining us, Thomas.
Thank you very much for having me.
So let's start with the anonymous letter that went public on Sunday. It was addressed to President Emmanuel Macron and said, "We see violence in our towns and villages. We see communitarianism taking hold in the public space. We see hatred of France and its history becoming the norm." He also warned that an impending civil war would be fueled by Islamism and identity politics. So can you tell us what are the fundamental concerns of the letter?
I would frame it that the letter writers are worried that the response of the government to the various pressures that France is experiencing is either too weak or inadequate. So the violence that you mentioned, it is simmering, but it has been for years now, especially in the suburbs, fueled by immigrants that do not integrate well within the French society. This isn't, I wouldn't say that this is the violence is at the height as of now in comparison to, say, 2005. Communitarianism means that there's an urge by some immigrant minorities to apply their laws, like, for example, forcing women to have traditional roles or particular way of dressing, polygamy, etc. But that has been going on since the 1980s, so that's not new. What is new is the new kind of cultural war that occurs about the French history, and which is coming from the US. It's about critical race theory, about wokeness. It's about dealing with the French colonial past, what happened in the Civil War in Algeria, what happened recently, for example, there was a commemoration of Napoleon's death about its colonial past. So the question is about, there are those pressures about attacks on the Republican order, about the culture wars that are coming, and the letter writers feel that the government is not doing enough.
The letter called the French government coward in dealing with the alleged threats of terror attack and violence against the police force. Are these criticisms justified in your opinion?
So again, this comes back to the feeling of inadequacy of a response. What is true in France, in a democratic society, the laws, new laws and new measures have to be deliberated, and sometimes they are for very long years, so the change may appear to be quite slow. Yet if you look at what happened since the major terrorist attacks of 2015, they really did quite a lot to in fact change the way this security threats are addressed. So you have to say that there is we have at this very moment we have an emergency state in France. You have an operation where the military are patrolling the streets, especially in more sensitive areas. You have new laws that allow the police to shoot, for example, which wasn't necessarily the case, say, 5-6 years ago. The police were, in fact, harmless towards any attacks. So there is a lot of adjustments that are being made. The letter writers, I believe, are not, they want stricter, faster measures. And I'm also a bit not surprised because they're in the army, or if they were former army generals, you pass an order, it's done. That's not how the political process in a democratic society plays out. It's actually slow, but it's coming around.
So do you think this political charge, since the presidential election is less than a year away, as many believe President Macron himself is turning right by warning against what he calls Islamist separatism? In your opinion, is the politics worsening the debate?
Definitely it's sharpening it. So I think everybody in France knows what's going on. So the debate is clearly fueled by anti-immigrant sentiment. Also, due to the fact that the success of anti-terrorist politics and measures of the last 6-7 years, which were not only due to the Macron government, mainly now the terrorist attacks are actually by immigrants, because in 2015, 2014, they were perpetrated by French out of immigration, but those that were born on the French soil. So now the sentiment is being back, taking back to immigration. We should have better control of our borders, and that's where part of the problem lies. So in the sense, that is a sign of a success. If you ask about Islamist separatism, there is a fringe on the left, and the left is very much divided on this as well. There's a left that views the requests of a big minority of Islamists or Islam-friendly politicians as being anti-Republican. I would say that if you ask whether the society is divided on this, I would say that only a minority is really claiming that there needs to be a greater acceptance of Islamic religion in the public sphere, because everybody here, most like 80% of the citizens would claim the republic is secular. There should be no place of religion in the public sphere. And Islamist separatism is perhaps even a bigger threat, a cultural threat to the existence of the republic than Marine Le Pen.
Just want to say here is I know there's going to be a pushback and there's going to be this whole posturing of, that this was a witch hunt, all the things that happen in these situations. No. The opposition was doing their job, and the media was doing their job asking these questions.
So supposedly 80% of schools don't have mechanical ventilation systems.
Yeah, and Trudeau will argue that he's been cleared, but Dave, I mean, he's been hit twice before with ethics violation. I mean, they're an ethically challenged government. But the commissioner, I think, said something key today, that while by the rule of law, he wasn't guilty of conflict of interest or all these things that he already admitted he was in conflict of. But the optics, I mean, their optics are all over. It doesn't make, I'm sorry, you're finance minister of a G7 nation and you're letting a charity in your office without unfettered access?
Yeah, and it was found in the report that Mario Dion clearly said that the staff was sort of angling in that direction to get the Kielburgers on board in this deal. I mean, that's pretty wrong. But you're right, it is all about optics, and it's just another knock against Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Just the fact that his name was associated with this at one point, found in conflict or not, it it's something that will stick to him, not necessarily as severely. Well, I think it will.
Oh, I think he went home and bathed in Pam tonight. It won't stick to him. Like he's spraying himself all with it.
It's. I mean, you can't force it. Obviously, the finance minister knew that he had done wrong because he stepped back, he stepped out of politics, and now he's just private citizen, right?
What were you saying, China boy? I gotta switch subjects for a second.
Bringing you vital information for your business.
No, he
automatically tried to make it right. But I think the fact that Trudeau's name was mentioned with regards to this investigation, this is going to come up again during the election. There is no doubt about it. The Conservatives are going to sink their teeth into this and go, hey, look, he's had this many, and plus he got away with one, then, you know, maybe it's time.
Well, in fact, Mr. O'Toole did weigh in on it, and here's what he had to say.
Mr. Trudeau did admit in the WE scandal he had a perceived conflict of interest. He broke the public trust. He said that himself. He's been found guilty twice previously of violating federal ethics rules as prime minister. Multiple ministers also found, the finance minister, former found guilty today, who's already left office. Canadians are tired. Canadians are frustrated by the culture of entitlement and corruption that surrounds the Trudeau government.
Yeah, the other thing that is something I think that's important to remember in this thing, Arlene, is that the WE charity was and is accused of lobbying illegally. Because remember, they went in dozens of times having meetings with ministers and all this stuff, and they never registered until after the fact to lobby. That's not a small thing.
No, it isn't a small thing. Look at how it's all hanging around so many things in the United States of America right now. And it isn't. I mean, we read it and go, oh, lobbying, we don't understand that. It is not a technical. What it means is something fishy may be going on, and there may be
38 times, not a small amount.
Yeah, no, it isn't a small matter.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. The questions, and that's why I said the questions about WE charity remain, and they are valid, and they are solid questions. And that relationship, and I agree that relationship has stained, let's put it this way, I think it has stained the Prime Minister. You know, he's got away from the technicality. However, if he's going to say
put on brown face and black face,
it is just going to emphasize the other technicalities that he didn't get away with. I mean, if this one is something that he's going to say I was, exonerated, what about the other ones that he clearly wasn't?
Tell us
there is. Yeah, there is so many. There's so many. Forgive Canadians of not knowing the whole list. I mean, we got it started with that. There is a sense of a kind of a reckless behavior when it comes to who you're associating with and who you're giving government money to.
Okay, she's not getting into the list that I think.
Negotiating. But on the other hand, there were three telecoms that thought that they might, with the new Biden administration, get out from under the situation, but they are in fact going to be delisted by the New York Stock Exchange, and those include China Telecom, China Mobile, and China Unicom. So it's not clear exactly what Biden is doing. Remember, this was not his move; it was Trump's move. But it seems.
He can.
Have a great night.
Yeah, all right. We're not there quite yet, but nonetheless, we will get there. Dave Bradley and Arlene Bynum joining us here tonight. I swear to God, the guy has to. The guy doesn't put on aftershave. He just gets the Pam out and just sprays it all over himself. That's what he must be doing. All right, when we come back, Elon Musk is talking out against Bitcoin. I didn't actually think Bitcoin was a thing, so I'm surprised to hear that it's dangerous and uses all sorts of fossil fuel. And then, of course, it got me thinking, well, if he's so worried about, Bitcoin using up all these fossil fuel, has anyone told him about what electric car batteries, the environmental catastrophe that causes? We will talk about that and what it means for the Bitcoin market in just a second. Stay with us, Alex Pearson on point. This is Global News Radio.
Market.
But there could also be some sort of action, maybe by Congress or by Biden, where they say that we want them out. We don't want anything to do with any, quote, Chinese company because they could be a security risk. It would have to pass once again, court muster, and that would be something for the future.
And you also mentioned China's big three telecom carriers. And last week, the New York Stock Exchange actually applied to the SEC for the permission to delist them. And so what does it mean for these three Chinese telecom carriers? And
how will it impact them and the U.S. investors?
Well, I mean, this has been coming for some time. As I said, in November, they were put on the list that was put out by Donald Trump as a last-ditch swipe at China, but it wasn't negated by the Biden administration when they came in. The telecoms applied for they re-registered, they registered a complaint and said, look, we want this reviewed. That review did not come forth, and now they're being delisted. In terms of what does it do to the business, basically nothing. There's such a small percentage of revenues that are garnered from the U.S. These are big telecom companies within China. They just won't be able to do as much outside in the United States. They're mostly providing commercial services, cloud services, and then some very, very small phone services to mostly Chinese companies that were based in the U.S.
And President Biden has signaled plans to maintain an assertive line concerning China, and he hasn't indicated any rolling back of other Pentagon moves to sanction entities. But what does it tell us, and what do we expect from the U.S. tech competition with China?
Well, the tech competition is real, and both sides, in essence, it comes down to trust. If I don't trust you, I can't rely on you. If I can't rely on you, I have to find another source of doing trade, whether it's a market or whether you're providing materials or whether you're providing some sort of finished product or intermediate product. So that trust has been severely broken. And people on both sides are eyeing each other and say, well, given the politics and given the situation, we might have to make other alternatives. Now, that's one caveat. American companies can't afford to give up the U.S., the Chinese market. And you see that quite clearly in the $3 trillion that has flowed into in foreign direct investment and into China over the last year or so. This is a stupendous number, and it has left the U.S. in the dust as a destination for FDI. So the political reality is, people are saying, not reality, political rhetoric is that, oh, China's bad, terrible, we don't want to do any business with them, we don't want our businesses to do business with them. But the economic reality is that's all being ignored, and companies and individuals are piling into China because it's the only game in town that's actually working and has a very competent future.
And talking about bilateral trade, the U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai said he expected to talk with her Chinese counterpart soon to review the Phase 1 trade deal between the two countries. So how do you view the trade relations between China and the United States since Biden took office? And what are the concerns from both sides now?
Well, I mean, the concerns from the U.S. side are mostly political. Biden does not have the majorities that he needs in the Senate in order to get through his his big plans. And as a result, he seems to be playing politics. He's looking increasingly towards the midterms. He sees a fractured Republican Party, which he thinks will result in a whole bunch more Democratic senators, or at least 52, 53, at which point he can get past. He's not going to be held up by one senator, this Joe.
Doing car care right. Insightful, engaging, intelligent. Global News Radio 640 Toronto. Welcome back to On Point with Alex Pearson on Global News Radio.
Okay, Elon Musk caused a lot of turmoil today on the Bitcoin market, as you've heard. He denounced the insane amount of energy use it takes to produce the uncertain money source. And he's been one of the biggest champions until, of course, today. And then he said, we will no longer use it as a means of payment for his electric cars. And then, of course, the currency plunged 10%. And I thought, well, what's the guy so worried about Bitcoin? What the hell does anyone know about the lithium batteries in his electric cars? They are very environmentally destructive. But apparently it's the Bitcoin he is worried about. Adam Oldfield, our Global News Radio 640 tech expert, joining us now. I gotta be honest, I know nothing about Bitcoin. I thought all along Bitcoin was like this kind of just thing on the web that you traded around. I didn't know it was like a hard good. I just don't understand it, but apparently it's a thing.
It is a thing. I don't know if it's a hard good, as you just referred to it as. You can't actually touch it or tangibly.
Well, he says, because he came out this afternoon. He says, whoa, I truly believe in crypto, but it can't drive a massive increase in fossil fuel, especially coal. So I'm thinking, well, is this like a tangible object, or is this thing like made of coal, or what is it?
I think his comment to the fact of how people can be able to appreciate a Bitcoin.
If I can print a Bitcoin on a paper, why can't I print it onto a banknote or a coin?
They call it mining, and just think of it as a bunch of computers running algorithms at all times. And those that want to harvest or mine more of the Bitcoin
you can be doing the thing for SETI or cancer research.
The fact that they use a lot of electricity. His comment, I think, was a little strategic on his side because, I mean, he's a champion. In fact, it's because of him that Bitcoin is trading above that $50,000 mark. It really took a leap. And he's been one of the biggest financiers I know that have been supportive of the cryptocurrency. I mean, O'Leary afterwards, I think he's now moving some of his money portfolio into it now. So, I mean, Musk is really charging the way. So his comment of obviously, and that is a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek, as you commented earlier, of, hey, this isn't right for climate change, but use my lithium-ion cars to drive. It's a bit of a, wait a minute, what? And I have to agree with you. I was a little taken back by it myself. But it does make sense. I mean,
nuclear.
Anyone
we should
since
make
even
nuclear
2007,
plants everywhere.
Mining of Bitcoins have taken a lot of computer power. You need a fast computer. You need the electricity to be on, and they use a lot of electricity. Now, what I understand is there's a lot of outlets in China, and I guess they are pretty much the biggest culprit when it comes to it. So
as well as coal pollution, so there you go.
Well, and they're the ones that are, I guess, accomplishing or causing a lot of that. If we really want to get down to it,
have electricity.
I mean, I don't know what his stance on this. If there is a reason, or I mean, he owns a big chunk of Bitcoin, so I'm no economic expert when it comes to this, but I'm sure there's a reason why. Maybe he's going to buy more of it. He said he's selling cars for it.
I was going to say, now that he cashed out,
he's subsidized, he's ultra wealthy. I mean, it's all about him. And so he says this comment, the Bitcoin dumps. I'm sure he probably bought up a lot of it. And then he announces today that he's going into another cryptocurrency, Dogecoin. That's a suitable replacement, like whatever the heck that is.
Well, it's supposed to be more environmentally friendly, or on renewable energy, if you will, wind power, and otherwise how it's being, utilized, if you will, because the whole climate change and carbon footprint is right now in everyone's face. I mean, just look at your any purchase you made with a carbon tax on it. We all know we're all contributing. So this is his point of making, we need to bring more awareness to the fact that how you mine these digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, blockchain even for that matter,
40010.
When we talk about
10 cents, and that 10 cents is subject to GST and HST and whatever it's called.
That is not necessarily done in a clean
serious. You charge me 11.3 cents.
That's the scam of green energy. I mean, that's why it's great for the people in Wall and Bay Street, because they make a lot of green out of it, but it is not environmentally friendly in any way because it's all driven by fossil fuel, but they're okay with that. None of it makes sense to me.
They don't last for fuck all in that
I'm not surprised you at all.
Burn out in about a day.
No, it doesn't actually. And like I said, I think you were right to comment on why does this not make sense? Because really, I don't think it does. And I would say that in a couple of days, it's all going to come out. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe he's buying more of it. As I mentioned, they bought a big chunk of it in February, like $1 billion, I heard. So, I mean, if he makes a comment like that, talks about Dogecoin, saying this is a more environmentally climate change focus, maybe this is an announcement on a bigger scale that we're expecting to see a new cryptocurrency coming out that he's very heavily invested in, and of course it will apply to his Tesla purchases.
Of course, and everyone will buy right into it. All right, Adam, I gotta go, but I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Alex. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too. That is Adam Oldfield. Again, it's not a market that I really have any understanding of. Duh. But again, I find it highly, highly hypocritical. Again, electric cars are not that environmentally friendly. When we come back, we will talk with the conservative health critic who's raising a lot of questions about AstraZeneca. And we'll talk about whether or not there could be class action suits against different levels of government over this sudden switch. That's next. Stay with us. Here's the top of the hour. I'm Alex Pearson here on Point. This is
That's what the government said.
Were you let go from your job as an independent contractor? You need employmentlawyer.ca. Many employees are misclassified as contractors, meaning you are still owed severance pay when your employment is terminated. Call your Samfiru and get what you're owed. Employmentlawyer.ca.
Paying off a mortgage is slow, but it doesn't have to be this slow. Tangerine starts you off with an easy online application and quick approval, and offers low upfront rates with the option of upping your regular payments and making lump sum prepayments of up to 25% each year. So paying off your mortgage can be really super fast. Whew. Well, at least faster. Tangerine, forward banking.
Hey, Cuckoo, what do you tell a teenager about cannabis?
Okay, I'm playing Haboot Canopy. Music.
Okay, Cuckoo, stop the music.
Looking for tips on how to talk with your teens about cannabis? Visit drugfreekidscanada.org for more tools to help start the conversation. drugfreekidscanada.org.
Just missed the top of the hour news? Get caught up in less than 60 seconds. Just add the flash briefing skill to Alexa, then set it to play 640 Toronto. And don't forget, you can listen to us live anytime by telling any smart speaker to play 640 Toronto.
Hiring can be challenging, but ZipRecruiter makes it fast and easy. We talked to Monica Starks, who needed to hire for a pivotal role at her company, GS Group.
As the owner of a construction company, finding the right people is a very difficult task. So I use ZipRecruiter.
ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology identifies the right people for your job and actively invites them to apply, which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ziprecruiter.ca/Canada. Monica did, and that's how she found Lamont, her new project superintendent.
The job is so perfect for me. I had a career breakthrough. I would have never found this job if it wasn't for ZipRecruiter.
With ZipRecruiter, we've hired everyone from accountants to project managers to field scientists. With ZipRecruiter, we get hiring results.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And now you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ziprecruiter.ca/Canada. That's ziprecruiter.ca/Canada. ziprecruiter.ca/Canada.
It was a rainy day when Pizzaville realised we all have things we should cut back on. For me half-brother Raoul, that's ordering inflatable toys. For others, it's carbs. So Pizzaville made the extra thin crust pizza. You get the same authentic Italian taste as our regular pizza, but with 2/3 less carbs. Because the last thing Raoul wants is an inflatable waist.
Pizzaville, stone-baked pizza. Fiercely Canadian. Authentically Italian.
Remember the 70s? Coffee was only a quarter, disco music blasting in every club, and when the man pulled you over after a couple of drinks, all he'd say was,
"I'll let you go this time, just drive carefully."
Well, it's not the 70s anymore. And when you get behind the wheel after a couple drinks, nowadays, this is what the man will say.
"You're under arrest for driving under the influence."
Buzz driving is still drunk driving. Don't drink and drive. A message from Global News Radio 640 Toronto. Are you faced with a severance offer deadline? You need employmentlawyer.ca. Severance deadlines are irrelevant and are used as a pressure tactic. Make sure that offer is fair before you sign. Call Lior Sanfiru and get what you're owed. Employmentlawyer.ca.
Toronto's #1 for breaking news, traffic, and weather. This is 680 News.
It's Thursday, May 13th. Good evening, I'm Scott Burnett.
And I'm Judy Friedman. Here's what's making news this hour. Still no end to the violence between Israel and Hamas. Israeli ground forces have now been deployed in the Gaza Strip.
Heads up. Literally, Toronto police blocking off a portion of Balmuto Street near Bay and Bloor after reports of a man throwing objects off a 40th floor balcony. Still no tennis, no basketball courts, no golf in Ontario until June 2nd at the earliest. Outdoor enthusiasts are not impressed.
They don't add up.
You gotta give us something to do.
The United States is one step closer to normalcy as the CDC eases guidance on indoor mask wearing for those fully vaccinated against COVID-19.
The Raptors and Chicago Bulls are just minutes away from getting...
I know we're all eager to get back to some sense of normal, but at a time...
Good evening from the Global News Desk. I'm Darren Boland. It's the decision that thousands of businesses and stir-crazy families in Ontario hoped would be different. The province is extending its stay-at-home order until June 2nd to bring down high rates of COVID-19. Premier Doug Ford says it's too soon to lift the order, which was set to expire next Thursday.
Friends, I know we're all eager to get back to some sense of normal, but at a time when contagious variants pose real risks to our province, we can't rush to reopen.
Well, the move means thousands of businesses and outdoor recreational facilities will remain closed, despite critics urging the reopening of the latter. Meantime, the province is pledging to offer all Ontario adults in the province their second COVID-19 vaccine dose by the end of summer, while children aged 12 to 17 will start receiving their first doses of the Pfizer vaccine the week of May 31st. While the province will remain under a stay-at-home order, some are openly questioning why that still includes outdoor activities. One of those people, an epidemiologist with Trillium Health, says not lifting restrictions on outdoor activities could backfire on the Premier. Global's Dave Woodard with more.
The announcement that outdoor activities would remain off limits came as a surprise to Dr. Simone Chakrabarty.
I think that we have very good evidence that, have some risk of outdoor transmission, but it is vanishingly small.
He says he understands we shouldn't be getting together for concerts or sporting events yet, but that keeping people inside, especially as the weather gets better, could backfire.
I think that right now, these types of really absent type of restrictive recommendations, you're losing the public.
Mayor Tory, meanwhile, sent out a press release saying he agrees that we need to stay the course on restrictions and thanked the Premier for the guidance, especially with the long weekend just over a week away. Dave Woodard at Global News.
Well, meanwhile, south of the border, a much different conversation is taking place. Updated guidance from the Centers for Disease Control today is offering fully vaccinated Americans a glimpse of a return to pre-pandemic normalcy.
You can start doing the things that you had stopped doing because of the pandemic.
The U.S. CDC changing its guidance on Thursday so that fully vaccinated Americans no longer need to wear a mask. An about-face from guidance released just 16 days ago saying masks would still be required if in a crowd. The mixed messaging between real-world evidence and CDC data led to sharp criticism that the agency was irrelevant and slow to react. Still, the update will give the more than 118 million fully vaccinated people in the U.S. more freedom to reconnect. In the moments after the announcement was made, several U.S. lawmakers, including the president, removed their face coverings. But there are still mask requirements, including a federal mandate on transportation vehicles and in some settings like hospitals and prisons. Dropping the mandate could also lower hesitancy rates as Americans see proof firsthand that the vaccinations work. Reggie Cicchini, Global News, Washington.
Well, Canada's Deputy Chief Public Health Officer says it won't be easy to determine whether the COVID-19 pandemic can be declared officially over. Dr. Howard New told a news conference today that the illness will likely be with us in some form for quite a while.
I think it's difficult to actually declare, quote, an end to the pandemic and what that might entail. I think, experts or scientists around the world, and I think myself included, would probably say that we were going to be living with COVID-19 for quite some time, for maybe even several years. We're not going to eradicate or eliminate it.
Oh, meanwhile, news says Canada has confirmed 18 cases of vaccine-induced blood clots after getting the AstraZeneca vaccine, and another 10 cases are under investigation. Well, a homegrown mRNA vaccine for COVID-19 shows promising results in its first small trial, and its makers is hoping to test it directly against the Pfizer vaccine. Calgary-based Providence Therapeutics says its vaccine produced no serious adverse events and developed good antibodies against COVID-19 that compare favorably with similar vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna. Providence Therapeutics CEO Brad Sorensen says the company is extremely pleased with the results, but feels like it's not getting the recognition it deserves from Ottawa or the support for a vaccine comparison trial.
We're running a comparative trial against Pfizer. We need 500 doses of Pfizer to run the trial. We've been asking for 2 months for access to those 500 doses, and we haven't gotten an answer.
A spokesman for Federal Innovation Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne says Providence has received almost $10 million in federal funding to date, and the company has been told Ottawa is also committed to supporting it through its phase 2 trial.
If you were a driver and you showed up and it said
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau didn't violate the conflict of interest pact in the We Charity affair, but Trudeau didn't recuse himself from cabinet discussions to have We Charity operate a federal student volunteer program. But as Global's chief political correspondent David Aiken reports, Ethics Commissioner Mario Dion says former Finance Minister Bill Morneau did break the rules.
Trudeau is cleared of charges in the We scandal, but not so for former Finance Minister Bill Morneau, who was found to have violated 3 different sections of the conflict of interest law. Commissioner Dion found that Morneau was in fact friends with We Charity founders Craig and Mark Kielberger. He gave the charity preferential treatment, and he failed to recuse himself from discussions about the student grant program, all of which, in Dion's view, added up to the perception that Morneau was advancing the interests of his friends, the Kielbergers, rather than protecting taxpayers' interests.
Listen to us in HD, tune to 95.3 FM, and select Channel 2. In sports, Bo Bichette hit a go-ahead 2-run double in the 9th inning, and the Toronto Blue Jays rallied yet again to beat Atlanta 8-4 this afternoon, completing the 6-game season sweep of the Braves. Meantime, the Raptors are in Chicago tonight for a matchup with the Bulls. Tip-off from the Windy City goes moments from now. Looking at your regional forecast from the Global News Weather Center, clear conditions expected tonight alongside an overnight low of +3. I'm Darren Boland, and this is Global News.
This is On Point with Alex Pearson on Global News Radio.
I don't believe that politicians should be delivering health advice, but the best advice that I have heard from my doctor and others is that people who've received 1 dose of AstraZeneca can very well get a second and should very well get a second dose of AstraZeneca.
Well, that is the Prime Minister, and he's lucky because most people don't have a doctor. But he, Aaron O'Toole, Premier Ford, they all got AstraZeneca, and they all say they'll take the second shot. The question is, will the 2 million Canadians who were told to take the shot get access to a second shot? Because the talking points are ramping up about mixing. And frankly, there's not enough data to show that it's effective. And I don't know about you, but I know I didn't sign on to take AstraZeneca and then all of a sudden mix things up like it's a cocktail hour, because we were told back then the safest vaccine is the first vaccine you take. And so what is the obligation of governments? Do they have to at least offer us the same shot, or can they mix it up? Michelle Rebel-Garner is the conservative health critic. She joins us now. Good to have you.
Great to be on the show tonight.
This should get interesting.
You know, we get this announcement a couple of days ago, and all we have been left with is this fog of information. What people just really want to know is, what are next steps? Can I get the same shot that I got?
And that's a perfectly reasonable question. I mean, it's one that I'm hearing in my constituency office. Many of my friends are asking this question. That's why we've been pushing the government for answers. The federal government really should be communicating to the public on this issue. It's their responsibility. They have, thousands of health experts employed within their ranks, and this is what they're paid to do. So, unfortunately, we haven't received information from the government in this regard yet. But I did call for an emergency meeting of the Health Committee, which will convene tomorrow. We should have the ministers and public health officials at our committee next week. Every day that goes by without these answers, I think, is a big problem for many Canadians.
Well, this is a shot that, if I'm right with the numbers, we got 20 million doses. So at the very least, is there any obligation
they don't have any other idea better than I do.
To then at least make it available? I mean, if I don't want to take it, I don't have to take it. But shouldn't those who are told to take it at least have the choice in that?
Yeah, a bit of some technical information on the procurement of the AstraZeneca vaccine. So Canada does have a contract, like a bilateral contract with the manufacturer, with AstraZeneca. We really haven't received any doses to date through that contract. The doses of AstraZeneca that we've received in the country to date have come from the COVAX fund. This is a program that was put in place to assist developing nations with vaccine procurement, but that Canada is sort of raiding from because we haven't had supply. We have poorly negotiated contracts, as far as I can tell. And also from charity from the Americans. There were, I think, over 1 million doses that were procured on loan from the American government. So that really does leave a lot of questions, I think, about when doses might be arriving with regard to AstraZeneca. We know that India is very reliant on this particular vaccine because it's the one that the Serum Institute produces, and India is seeing a significant second wave. So I think that there's a lot of questions that Canadians need to have answered that relate to whether or not we are when we're getting more doses, and whether or not those will be made available to Canadians who want a second dose of AstraZeneca.
What is the liability? And this is something that I was thinking about for the last couple of days. Is there a liability, or is there a built-in protection for governments when ordering vaccines like this? If someone were to take it and it's not what they wanted, could the government of the day be facing class action suits, or do they pad themselves from those kinds of liabilities?
It's a great question. It's one I'd love to have an answer to, and it's why we've been pushing the federal government to release the details of these vaccine contracts for almost a year now. I've moved many motions in the House of Commons. The federal government has just ignored motions passed by the House of Commons to get that information. As recently as this week, the Privy Council office, or like the head of government, like the sort of the C-suite of government, if you will, said that they were working with vaccine manufacturers to discuss what could be released. Well, those contracts are the property of the Canadian public. Tax dollars go into negotiating those contracts, and we live in a democracy where that type of information should be produced. So I'd love to have an answer for you, Alex, but the unfortunate reality is that Trudeau, I think is purposely at this point hiding those details. The European Union, for example, is considering legal remedy against AstraZeneca for delivery schedules, I believe. So, the question becomes why isn't the federal government looking at similar options? So all those questions with regard to remedy really tie back to the contracts that nobody's really had a look at.
And while the talking points have changed, I mean, clearly in the last couple of days, it's gotten, 1-dose summer, 2-dose fall. That's not what we were told. And so everything sounds like it's becoming a marketing and very gimmicky. And I got to be honest, I get a lot of emails from listeners who either no longer want the second shot or just literally don't know who to trust anymore. I mean, all we're getting are these kind of catchy phrases, but I don't want to be vaccinated in the fall. I want to be vaccinated. I was told I was going to be vaccinated because I think already we've accepted a bit of experimentation just with the delays in the shots. And somehow we are normalizing playing around with things like dosing or second doses because of politics.
Well, I want to start by saying that 1 dose of a vaccine is proven to reduce the severity and incidence of COVID. So I think it is a responsible action for the Canadian public to become vaccinated. However, that said, it's also reasonable for the Canadian public to expect to have a second dose within the manufacturer guidelines. Canada is one of I think it's the only country that has extended the dosing window to a maximum of 4 weeks. We don't have a lot of clarity around waning immunity. And now with the AstraZeneca vaccine, decisions being made on that by different levels of government, we also don't have clarity on what happens if somebody has to mix vaccines, which is something I don't think a lot of Canadians thought about who got that first shot. But I do want to commend Canadians who are getting vaccinated because that's what's going to pull us out of this. All that said, there are a lot of other questions. There are things the federal government could be doing right now to encourage people to get vaccinated, such as issuing clear advice on what fully vaccinated persons can do. This afternoon, the American government, the White House, Joe Biden was out and said, if you are fully vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask. That's essentially ending lockdowns in the United States. That's a huge fundamental policy shift that I think we're only just starting to talk about. I asked the health minister a similar question in the House of Commons in Canada this afternoon. Brutally dismal answer. And I even alluded to the fact that this type of clarity, these types of guidelines on what fully vaccinated persons or half vaccinated persons can or can't do is what is going to incent Canadians beyond just that obligation to go and get vaccinated, particularly among very poor communications from the federal government. So a lot of work left there to do, Alex, and certainly I'm committed to getting some answers.
Just before I let you go, I want to ask you on Mr. Dion's ruling today with the ethics situation. And he ruled that while there may be a perception of conflict of interest, it didn't meet the criteria when it came to Justin Trudeau. So he has been given a pass on the whole We scandal, but his former financier minister will pay the price. 3 sections of the Ethics Act were violated. But, you know, when you look back at the record, Trudeau had blamed the public service for the decision-making and said clearly that his government had nothing to do with the sole source contract. But then you look at the ruling today, clearly his top minister very much was playing fast and loose with the rules.
What a brutal thing, hey? I mean, I read that ruling and just, you know, we've gone into so much debt in this country. We've had such a poor response to the pandemic. We you know, you and I are sitting here talking about Canadians being half vaccinated for months at a time. You know, you think about where the federal government's priority was, and it was the finance minister trying to help his friends out. And, you know, close to the tune of close to $1 billion. And it's just unconscionable. There's so many examples of this type of misguided principle within the Liberal government. And I just, you know, even if somebody votes Liberal, that's listening to this, like, they can't be happy hearing this, right? Like, that's such a waste of funds, a waste of time, and it's cronyism, right? And that's not how a government should operate. So, you know, I don't have a lot of hope that the Trudeau government will learn from this, because this is one of several ethics violations that, you know, members of the government have had ruled against them. I do think that, you know, we need to have stronger accountability legislation in the country, but also the Canadian public, you know, deserves better from people that are in government. So a lot of things to digest there, but I think the key takeaway is that they were looking after their friends, not for Canadians.
There seems to be an ethical challenge within that government, indeed. Appreciate your time on this today.
Have a good one.
That is Michelle Rempel-Gardner joining us. Busy she is because she is the health critic, and there's plenty to criticize. We will talk about this and many of the other day's headlines, and we'll do that next. In round 1 of Counterpoint, brought to you by our good friends over at Pizzaville. That is next here on Point. This is Global News Radio.
Time now for a check on the roads with a look at shopper traffic. Here's Ari Rabinovich.
Well, we're looking at problems on the westbound 401 at Mississauga Road, rather westbound QEW at Mississauga Road. 2 left lanes blocked to the collision, but getting word from MTO that we might have some lanes reopening shortly. In the meantime, just a slight slowdown as you make your way through the Mississauga Road junction. And also the ramp from northbound McCowan to the west 401, that's still closed for that tractor trailer rollover. A separate issue, the northbound Kennedy ramp to the west 401 is closed, but that's due to some police activity on the go here. A crashing town, too, has westbound Kingston Road blocked before Morningside, as well as one on Thorncliffe, south of Overley. So you might want to avoid these spots. CPP Investments help.
Oh. That's what all your money is.
This is KCRW, and you're tuning in during our spring fundraiser. KCRW's driving the future.
As of May 10th.
In the third person.
As of May 10th, 2021, the number of active, resolved, and total cases of COVID-19 within the CF population. Thank you. All current active cases, 60. All resolved cases, 1,670. Total of all positive cases since the beginning of the pandemic, 1,730. This is not very useful information.
Palms are getting sweaty. Jenny's ring is a famous.
Washing your hands for at least 20 seconds.
Here and help them as much as we can in the concrete impact later when the flooding will set in, and then in the third phase when there is a risk of breaking out like the cholera. Evacuation in central Mozambique again. Yeah, this year is the morning after in the slum area of Playa Nova in Cairo. As you can see, many of these makeshift houses have been destroyed. In the middle of the night, around 1 o'clock in the morning.
Experienced source for buying and holding your physical gold and silver, whether it's direct or even in your RSP or TFSA.
It's a bit like a deja vu experience for us here in the same school. We had many displaced people 2 years ago. Now we are out here with our colleagues to assess the situation and the most urgent needs. Luckily, we have pre-positioned stocks that can quickly be distributed. But there's, again, a lot of work ahead here in central Mozambique.
أول شغل خسرت أبوي، وبعدين خسرت دراستي 3 سنين، وخسرت بيتنا كنا قاعدين بيه، يعني كنا قاعدين.
Or visit us at 1-800-GOTJUNK.com.
Hello, I am water.
And I am earth, and we are just made for each other.
I come down as rain and hit on earth.
Together we make mud, sweet, beautiful mud.
Some find us challenging.
While all those Subarus with symmetrical full-time all-wheel drive revel in our creation.
Mud, our special gift to the world. Enjoy Subaru's all-weather drive event with great rates on 2021 Subaru Foresters. Go online to build and price yours and adventure on in all weather.
This is Counterpoint, brought to you by Pizzaville on Global News Radio.
821, great to have you here. Little Macau, gotta get you in the mood. Coming up at in the 9 o'clock hour, I have a long discussion with our friend. Who am I talking to? Yeah, Terry Glevin from the National Post. He's written a terrific read, I think, that explains the situation between Israel and Palestine, in particular Hamas. And he knows a lot about the region, and it's definitely worth tuning in for that. For now, let us get to the first round of Counterpoint, brought to you by our friends over at Pizzaville, 416-736-3636. Of course, you can get them online also at pizzaville.ca. We've got our Thursday regulars, Dan McTagg, former Liberal MP and president now of Canadians for Soon Not to Be Affordable Energy, and Michael Toad, columnist at Troy Media, Louis Politics, Washington Times contributor, and a former speechwriter to one Stephen Harper. Hello there.
Hey, good evening, Alex.
Let me start with the COVID stuff, and there's a lot going on and a lot of takeaways from what Ford said today. I mean, the premier, I think it's no big secret that we were going to stay locked down until at least June 2nd, which I will bet now is going to be extended even further, and that things, like golf can't open because golf leads to drinking. Hey, listen.
And my buddies, I know what happens. They pick up another buddy, 2 or 3, they go out, go golf, and then there's nothing wrong with golfing. The problem is the mobility. Then after golf, they go back, they have a few pops. That's the problem. So that's the issue. And what we need, we're just asking people. I understand, believe me, the weather's nice. Everyone wants to get out. I'd love to get out golfing. I'm a terrible golfer, but I'd love to get out golfing.
Michael, this is not even about golf for most people. It's about doing anything outside. They're just not letting anyone do anything. And God forbid people have beer outside in the fresh air.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, look, it's the magic of the 19th hole, as they often say. Premier Ford is not wrong in the sense that obviously some people, when they go golfing after they finish, they go off and have a couple of drinks. I've gone golfing, I've done it. But it doesn't mean that I do it every single time, and it doesn't mean that a lot of people who go on the links do it every single time. In fact, if anything, based on COVID-19, a lot of people would just follow the rules, observe whatever they have to do, have their, go through their 18 holes, and then go home. And I think, unfortunately, what's happened here, and it's not just golf, we know that tennis courts are closed, basketball courts are closed, and it's the same sort of theory as well. You're just assuming that there's another part to the story, when in fact what people really want to do is they just want to go outside, they want to enjoy themselves, they want to see their friends, play a little bit, and then head home. And we, unfortunately, there's just no study right now from any part of the world that states anything other than the fact that going outside and being outside and enjoying the fresh air, playing sports, seeing people, doing whatever is the right thing to do and the best thing for your health as well. So I really disagree with the Ford government on this issue. I mean, I'm not going to sit here, I'm not going to agonize over it, and I don't think a lot of people will, at least not within a 48 to 72 hour period, because we're just used to it. But I think we have to start thinking a bit more seriously and a bit strongly about this. So if you're right, Alex, and the stay-at-home order extends past June 2nd, which unfortunately I think it will too, I hope that if nothing else, he at least lifts the restrictions on those, because we've got to get outside, not just kids, but adults too. We've got to get outside and do stuff, do things, not just stay at home all the time.
Yeah, and for some reason, Dan, the 2 weeks never is just 2 weeks, because we've been hearing 2 weeks for 15 months.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be a never-ending addition to the time, but I'm with Michael on this. I think the Ford government has to sort of put an idea behind the notion that on June 2nd, it really has to be it. It probably won't be, but we're heading to summer. First day today for all your listeners. We're out enjoying it as best as we could, keeping our distances and observing. I think after a year, people have become fairly disciplined, at least most of us. And while you don't want to sort of create an avalanche type of situation where you say, I know most of you are responsible, it's always the yahoos out there who tend to take things to a large extent, and that's a few beers, a few pops, turns into, a massive party. I am really at the point where I think we can make an argument that summertime tends to see these cases, no matter how virulent, drop. And it's for the reason Michael has pointed out. Getting outside, getting fresh air does a lot more good. And I think it's frankly, I now have examples that are coming awfully close to people I know, where there's issues of mental health, potential for suicide. It's a wreck, and it's far worse than I think what we're trying to prevent.
Yeah, but that collateral damage is okay. Meanwhile, we got very little clarity about what freedom might look like, when or if, and the one thing that kind of stuck out to me as I go into this never-ending homeschooling is if schools will open before end of year. And so the Premier was asked about this, and I was troubled by the response we heard.
We have some docs that are saying yes, but then we have the teachers union that wants to potentially put an injunction against opening the schools. I just need the labor leaders to sit down with the docs and come up with a solution.
I heard that, Michael, and I thought, really? Who is in charge here? The education unions are going to file an injunction. It's all about the kids, after all. I mean, there's no reason in low-risk areas why kids in the nicer days can't go sit outside with their classroom and their teacher, even if just for a few weeks at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of people are sort of thinking privately, will the schools even reopen? I mean, I think that's been discussed now for a few weeks.
Oh, there's other people's
because,
kids. I want it
it's
that
only
way.
going to be a few weeks of school. The private schools would only be about 2.5 to 3. The public schools would be roughly about a month, give or take. But I agree with you, and I've thought about this issue myself, and I think that it would be healthy and very healthy for our children to at least go back, see their friends, even if they've been seeing them during this period of time, the stay-home order, just to be outside with them for a little bit, do their classes, enjoy the nice weather, be together, socialize, and as Dan pointed out in the previous thing, for mental health as well, because the mental health of our children is also important and it's crucial. I think that would actually be a really good thing to do as well. So again, it's not for a long period of time, and if the Ontario government ultimately says, you know what, irrespective of what the unions are doing, injunctions and all this nonsense, we just don't think that we want to basically uplift or uproot our families and do this for a few weeks. I'm not going to sit and cry about it, but I think it would be a wise idea to do, especially if all the other things are close to us, including tennis courts and golf courses and basketball courts. For God's sakes, let's think about education. Let's think about the kids. Open it up for a little bit. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I will cry, and I think a lot of parents will cry, Dan, because we are watching our children be damaged by this. And while, yes, teachers have concerns too, we all do. But by now, certainly because we know that the spread's not as much of a risk outside, I just really think the unions have to pick their battles, and we got to think outside the box to what is best for the kids.
We do, and I think there's a political dimension to this that we may not have discussed, which I think is critical. I mean, we haven't seen Ford for 2 weeks. We know that he took a hit over what he did a few weeks ago with the lockdowns. We know that the unions, up until the laws changed, I think it was a week ago Tuesday, that the laws changed. You cannot politically advertise, so therefore we saw these the electors, the Catholic teachers, all these others making their hits, taking their shots at Ford. I think Ford recognizes now that he's either got to choose having the doctors. The only way he's going to get out of this is if he's got the physicians on side, the so-called scientists on side. It doesn't really matter now. It's really the teachers' unions versus the Ford government, and it looks like the only way in which he can move ahead is if he's got science on his side, he's got the doctors on side. And if they say yes, then he's fine. If they say no, he's got to stick with them, because the other side is not definitely going to be his friend anytime soon.
Yeah. They never were, they never will be. All right, let me pause it there. When we come back, we will dive into the whole ethics issue, because apparently Trudeau was not in an ethics breach, but that does not mean he was not in conflict of interest. So we will talk about that and will it stick? And we'll do that in round 2 of Counterpoint, brought to you by our good friends over at Peatsville here on Point. I'm Alex Pearson. This is Global News Radio.
Dads, we all got one.
Close the fridge door, will ya? You're letting all the cold air out.
Always trying to save a buck or two around the house.
Are you almost done in there? You've been running the water for 20 minutes.
At LG Home Comfort, they're dads too, and moms, so they understand saving money on energy. That's why if you're an Ontario homeowner, your first and last call should be to LG Home Comfort for your heating, cooling, and water needs. So get a tankless water heater and save on that 20-minute shower, or flip on that air conditioner. Visit lghomecomfort.ca to learn more. Have you ever been arrested, charged, or fingerprinted by the police for holding, smoking, or using cannabis? Now that cannabis has been decriminalized in Canada, receiving a full pardon can be as simple as contacting Pardons Canada or visiting pardons.org and requesting your record to be removed. And if you act now, your application and pardon process may be 100% free, courtesy of the Flower Corporation. That's right. Thanks to the Flower Corporation, your cannabis-related pardon may be 100% free. So contact Pardons Canada today by calling 647-557-8864 or visiting pardons.org and remove your cannabis-related offense today. With over 32 years of helping Canadians successfully remove their criminal past, you can trust in Pardons Canada to be fast and discreet. The number to call is 647-557-8864 or visit pardons.org and get started today. Thank you, Flower.
As a business owner, you need a one-stop solution to all your IT needs.
You need the Wise Tech Group.
Because Wise Tech Group takes a proactive approach to providing reliable managed IT services.
Talk to Wise Tech Group today about security and backup.
Wise Tech Group offers migrating to cloud solutions.
An unparalleled service from their help desk support. Email anytime. help@itsupportshow.com.
help@itsupportshow.com.
Do you remember the first time you rode your bike? You're doing great, son. The first time you went on a date.
You look so handsome.
Your firstborn. Your first job. Welcome to the firm, son. Your first drink.
With a Gaza resident just a little while ago who said that there was indeed an intense air attack on Gaza City itself.
Reuters is reporting over 100 people have been killed in Gaza over the past 4 days, and 7 people have been killed in Israel. Now, China, Norway, and Tunisia say the UN Security Council should swiftly hold an open meeting on the violence. Phil Martino, 680 News.
And we have an update now on a police investigation in the area of Bay and Bloor downtown. The intersection is now reopened after a police investigation. The roads were closed at Bloor Street West and Belmudo around 6:30 tonight after reports of a man throwing objects from the 38th floor of a building. Toronto Police tell 680 News officers were able to locate the man, and they say police have resolved the situation safely.
680 East Highway 34, the province-wide stay-at-home order will be staying until at least June 2nd. 680's Richard Southern has the latest from Premier Ford.
Ford says he's keeping the stay-at-home order in place for 2 more weeks until June 2nd. Doing so, he says, to try and save the summer.
My goal is to have the most normal July and August possible. That won't mean large sporting events or concerts, but if we manage the next few weeks properly, I believe that we can have things in a very good place this summer.
But until June 2nd, Ford says all outdoor activities, including golf, will remain off limits.
There's nothing wrong with golfing. The problem is the mobility. Then after golf, they go back, they have a few pops. That's the problem.
So what exactly will it take to lift the stay-at-home order on June 2nd? The Premier didn't have a clear answer.
We'll look at the numbers on June the 2nd, and we'll see where we go from there.
Green Party leader Mike Schreiner.
It's completely unacceptable that we're 14 months into this pandemic, and the Premier can't even give us metrics on the goals we're trying to achieve.
There was also no new clarity on those looking for a second AstraZeneca shot, although the Premier said...
They have AstraZeneca. I'll take my second shot in a second.
I'm Richard Southern.
So what do Ontarians think of the extended lockdown? 680's Mark Douglas is gauging reaction.
June 2nd at the earliest. That's when we can hope to use golf courses, tennis courts, basketball courts, and more. Once again, reaction from those enjoying a gorgeous day out here in Trinity Bellwoods Park.
Scandal. I'm trying to figure out how many months it's been, but it feels like forever. But looks like third time's a charm for the Prime Minister as Ethics Commissioner Mario Dion's clearing him of ethics violations in connection with the weed charity. However, his former Finance Minister violated 3 sections of the Ethics Act, including failing to recuse himself from the process and then giving preferential treatment to the Kielburgers, awarding the sole source contract worth about $900 million. And then at the time, Trudeau blamed the public service. They made this decision. He stated very clearly his government had nothing to do with the sole source contract. But clearly, his government had a lot to do with this, with the top minister. We're talking a finance minister, top minister in a G7 country, basically playing fast and loose with the rules and peddling influence to award a close friend with a very big contract.
Well, certainly the media gave him up in Ottawa a quick pass, and went out of their way to say, "Hey, he dodged a bullet here, and he's exonerated." I say not so fast. And I have dealt with the conflict of interest with Mary Dawson over my work with gas price prediction when I was doing through my website as an MP, and some people didn't like that because, of course, it was made to be very popular. However, except when the price went up, and I was correct. The reality, however, I think is that the conflict of interest guidelines applied to members of Parliament is far more harsh than it is to the Prime Minister in this case. The perception is the reality, and it's perception that has now completely overtaken, I think, the idea that this Prime Minister, his wife got money, spoke at these events, his mom got money, his brother got money. Listen, Alex, if any one of us were in a similar situation, would we not be called on the carpet for a conflict of interest? Of course we would. But because of the mealy-mouthed nature in which the guidelines are written, and I don't think Mr. Dion really want to be the one to say, 3 times you've struck out, Mr. Trudeau, after the Island Agacon affair, and of course after the SNC-Lavalin findings of guilt, whatever that should mean, because of course we know it's just moral improbity. It's not really a financial one. I think here we have a Prime Minister who shouldn't be gloating, because had this happened to any member of Parliament as opposed to the Prime Minister, the shoe would have been the other foot. There would have been a finding of guilt.
Yeah, look, he's got 2 violations already against him, Michael. But I think it's important to remember that we, was found lobbying this government 38 times, and they weren't registered to lobby. They registered after the fact, but in the report it is very clear that they had access to the entire finance department. The other thing is, and I'm not sure this doesn't reflect on Trudeau, is that maybe by the rule of the book he did not break ethics laws, but certainly the perception doesn't look very good. There was a conflict of interest. He admitted it himself.
Yeah, he did walk a very fine line, and, obviously he'll take some pleasure in the fact, this being Justin Trudeau, that he was exonerated, and that's fine. There's not much he can do.
Stretch.
He'll
That's a stretch. I know he will. That's a stretch, though.
No, him, not the law. I don't agree with the decision. Mario Dion actually should have been able to show that, and there was sort of a line in there where you can see he was almost hesitating, where the perception sort of exists because you can see it in the air, but you just can't basically draw it from line A to line B. And that's the only reason that Trudeau may have gone around it, or as Dan has sort of correctly suggested, 3 strikes, you're out. It looks terrible if you're the ethics commissioner who actually does that. But at the same time, though, I think that certainly with Bill Morneau having been found guilty on 3 charges, even though he left politics to go try to find his, I always laugh, I say, his dream job, this was a little babe. But aside from the silliness, Bill Morneau obviously really got hammered pretty bad, and the proverbial bus rode over him quite a bit. So that actually works against the Liberal government as well, because the Minister of Finance is a senior position, the high-ranking position. You're the one who's looks at the budget. You deal with the deficit. You deal with the money of tax. And this is what happens to you. 3 strikes against him, which is pretty vicious. That's more than Justin Trudeau got for either the Aga Khan or NSC Law ones. So if nothing else, the Liberal Party got booted up the backside a little bit. It would have been nice if Trudeau had been along for the ride, but I guess it's just not to be.
Well, we'll see. There's still time. I mean, they are so fluid at doing this. I mean, there's lots of runway to go. Let's talk about a lawsuit by the CBC launched against the Conservative Party when it was Andrew Scheer as leader. This was in the final days of the 2019 election, where it accused the party of copyright infringement for using broadcaster footage in an online ad and tweets. Well, it was laughed out of the court basically by the judge, who basically said, yeah, no, this is fair dealing, and that's why all the broadcasters were in that particular ad. And so there was no objective evidence of the likelihood of any reputational damage to the CBC. But Dan, it did do a lot of damage. It was a distraction for Andrew Scheer, but I think, the CBC, which we own, so as a matter of fact, I can run any footage I want. We pay for it, but it's not a good look for them because they've been accused of being biased, and it looks like they're very biased.
Well, it plays very much into the notion the CBC has an agenda. The fact that their own lawyers advised them that this wasn't a very wise course of action and that the outcome would be predictable, as you have quite rightly set it out. There's no one that expects this not to get tossed or overturned or at least refuted by a judge. My concern, though, is that you have now a significant divide between a policy of a party that says that they want to restrict the funding to the CBC, which a lot of Canadians should have a say on, especially when, and in all due respect, 1 or 2%. Watching your réseau, your network, does not constitute, the need for us to bail them out by $1 billion a year. I'm not saying that they should be shut down. I just think that their bias has become very, very clear and very close to disqualifying them from future public funds.
Yeah, you see an apology coming?
Let me hold my breath.
I'm not going to hold my breath either. No, there's no apology coming. But you know what? If you actually look at it directly, and I think Dan's made the case pretty well, so I'll just add this. If you actually look at the laws directly, fair dealing was always understood, whether it was for the Conservative government or whether it was for a Liberal government, whether it's for any political party. It's clearly in the law. It's clearly stated. The CBC had no case from the start. I don't know why they ended up the amount of money they wasted, the time, the effort, the anger. It obviously got the media worked up, especially the Liberal media, to sort of blast away the Conservatives, but it was for nothing. It was all for naught because it's right there in the black and white. You did not have to go to court over something like this. CBC was just frustrated, and unfortunately, no, they'll never apologize. And who knows, if push comes to shove and they find themselves in the same situation, God knows they could do it again.
Oh, God.
Good luck. Meanwhile, experts saying the murky details of the controversial Bill C-10 will not be clear until the CRTC actually drafts specific regulations associated with the bill. So the Liberals are telling people, look, it's not going to affect free speech. And for this average, social media user, I mean, most Canadians are not paying attention to this issue, Dan. So they're asking Canadians to take a leap of faith. We're not going to screw you over. Do you have faith or trust in this government that they'll do the right thing?
Well, the minister doesn't know what the bill says. Why should we trust, the advice of the spoonmeisters out there? Look, I have every expectation that if you're leaving this to the bureaucrats to try to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, you're going to wind up with far more than what you bargained for. And I saw this with respect to the clean fuel standard other regulations. The government oversells, doesn't do its study, doesn't do its background, doesn't probe this accordingly. If every Canadian is good with losing their freedoms and having the possibility that what they publish is suddenly going to be edited or removed, or if they happen to have a lot of followers, if they're good with that, then that's fine. That's great. But you're not a Democrat, and that's not the way we roll in this country. And for the minister pushing the bill to have failed as miserably as he did, and now saying, well, it will catch it in the regulations. You'll catch it all right. By then it'll be too late. And of course, it will go on to another issue, and we'll continue to see the slow trickle, the diminishment of our democracy and our freedoms and our ability to express freely without reproach.
Yeah, and I think it would be a better way to explain it, Michael, for people. I mean, look, it's the Liberals in charge now, but it could be the Conservatives one day. Would you be any more comfortable with them in charge? And I'd say no.
No, I wouldn't either. I mean, I think the real key is when the Liberals quietly got rid of Section 4.1, which is in Bill C-10, which created the barrier between what the government can do towards social media, or basically makes them two separate areas or two separate avenues where they should not basically cross one another. When that was eliminated, basically the Liberals showed their hand very early that they were going to go after social media. And the blowback, it's fine to say this, but look, the Heritage Minister himself, even though he said on the one hand, basic users aren't going to be attacked, it's only going to be the million people who have millions of followers on YouTube.
Exactly.
What's the magic of a number? They'll sit in the commission, they'll say, you know what, maybe it shouldn't be millions, maybe it should be hundreds of thousands. And guess what? That brings in a whole bunch of things on Twitter, let alone. Suddenly they become the broadcasters, so to speak. That means that our MPs and others would actually be held would be held to force by the government depending on what they say. So it's nice what they're saying. Yes, they backtrack, but do I believe it? Like Dan? Not.
And check it every 5 years.
All right, guys, gotta leave it there, and I thank you so much for your time.
Great to be here.
My pleasure. Have a good night.
Night, Alex.
Dan McTagg and Michael Tobe joining us here tonight for round 2 of Counterpoint, brought to you by our friends over at Patesville. When we come back, oh, what a shock of all shock. All these pandemic pets that everyone got, apparently they're being dumped by record levels. We'll talk about that and a new way to camp in just a minute. Stay with us here. Alex Pearson on point. This is Global News Radio.
And now it's time to go out and take a look at the roads with chopper traffic. Here's Ari Rabinovich.
And on the westbound QEW at Mississauga Road, the 2 left lanes are blocked once again for cleanup following this earlier crash. But looks like the MTO crews that are blocking the lanes here again are about to leave once again.
Good,
so hopefully those delays will ease off. But again, the problems here more or less are clear. And on the 403 eastbound at Dundas, a new collision that blocks the right lane. We got some crews on the scene for one of the vehicles in the ditch as well. And southbound on the 410 near Courtney Park, reports of a wheelbarrow in 2 left lanes there. So just take extra caution on the approach. As well, the ramp from northbound McAllen to the west 401 that is reopened following that earlier tractor trailer rollover. But the ramp from northbound Kennedy to the west 401, that's still closed with ongoing police activity. CPP Investments helps to ensure the CPP fund remains sustainable and secure for millions of Canadians. Visit cppinvestments.com. I'm Ari Urbanovich, Global News Radio, 640 Toronto, Chopper Traffic.
Vashon Insurance Group presents Did You Know?
Vashon Insurance has insurance companies which recognize your good driving for 10, 15, 20, and 25 years fault-free. How does your present company reward you for being accident-free? Call Vashon to see how they can save you money.
I'm Conrad Vashon, and we're your insurance broker. Vashon Insurance Group. Call 416-239-3373. That's 239-3373.
I'm Mike Stafford, and here's a look at this week's Your GTA. All blood types are needed. Everyone who can is encouraged to donate. Ask a family member, friend, or
4,000 a day. Today we're posting again 2,759.
Hospitalizations dropping again today with ICU admissions unchanged and more of those patients needing a ventilator. Starting today, people 40 and older province-wide can book a vaccination appointment. More than 6.6 million doses have already been administered. I'm Irene Precklett.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he's anxious about the rise in the UK of the COVID-19 variant that was first identified in India. He says officials are weighing their options after a recent study showed the variant is becoming more prevalent in that area.
At the moment, there's a very wide range of scientific opinion about what could happen, but we want to make sure that we take all the cautious steps now that we could take.
Health officials in London say the Indian variant has been identified in nearly 8% of the 127,000 cases tested between April 15th and May the 3rd. With the arrival of 655,000 AstraZeneca doses today, the federal government says there will be enough doses to give everyone their second shot. 8 provinces, though, have halted first doses of this vaccine due to either supply fears or concerns about an increased risk of a very rare blood clot that's linked to the shot. Major General Danny Fortin, who's in charge of federal vaccine distribution, says up to 270,000 doses are still sitting in provincial freezers.
The situation at AstraZeneca is evolving, and we'll work with the provinces in terms of their supply needs. We want to assure everyone that sufficient supply will be available for those who want a second dose of AstraZeneca or who cannot take an mRNA vaccine.
Fortin says discussions are taking place about the possibility of moving vaccines between provinces to make sure they get used. The vaccine already delivered won't expire until the end of June, while this latest shipment could be good until the end of August. We'll check the roads and the weather coming up next.
What do you guys think of Tim's new vanilla cream cold brew coffee?
It's like smooth across the bar.
Velvety smooth. Tim's new cold brew coffee. Enjoy trying it. Enjoy describing it. It's time for Tim's at participating restaurants in Canada.
If the kitchen is the heart of the home, then Gaggenau appliances are the soul of the kitchen. The kitchen without compromise demands built-in appliances designed to work together. Witness the timeless design of Gaggenau shine in a myriad of interior styles. Experience the difference with Gaggenau appliances at Appliance Canada. Call, click, or connect with our appliance experts now at appliancecanada.com. Appliance Canada. For your home, for your life.
Your census invitation has arrived in the mail. Your participation will help plan programs and services for your community. Your census, your community, your future. A message from the Government of Canada.
City News Time, 8:51. Now time for traffic and weather. Here's Caroline Donahue.
Well, if you're out and about on the major highways, we have definitely the first thing you need to watch out for is the debris that we have going on right now. So southbound on the 410 at Courtney Park or just south of Derry, we have a wheelbarrow on the highway, believe it or not. It is southbound 410 at Courtney Park. And actually, as I'm just telling you this, it looks like MTO crews have picked it up. So it's no longer there, which is great news because that was a very dangerous situation. On the eastbound 403, east of Dundas, we have a collision. It's blocking the right lane. Crews are on scene. One of the vehicles actually ended up in the ditch, so it's going to take them a while to get that out of the ditch. But in the meantime, delays are not that bad. It's really just slowing down, really minor, just at the spot of the crash, so nothing to really worry about. Southbound on the 400 at Aurora Road, we have a right lane blocked with construction, and the westbound King ramp to the South 400 is closed. We did just have the southbound 400 ramps to King reopen, however, so that's good. Northbound on the 400 at Teston, 2 left lanes blocked off. Northbound Kennedy, no access to the westbound 401. And if you're on the eastbound 407, we have the ramps to the 427 shut down due to construction. Also, just in city streets, it looks like there's a protest going on near Bathurst and Steele, so if you're in the area, just be careful. Your next report is coming up at 9:01. Now the forecast. Here's Natasha Ramsahai.
The stretch of 20-degree weather continues. Even overnight lows are slightly above seasonal. We're going to wake up to 8 degrees in sunshine. Tomorrow, after that sunny start, a little bit of cloud in the afternoon, 22 degrees on the way. And then Saturday, increasing cloud, a high of 21. This is going to be the best chance for showers through the weekend is Saturday afternoon between 3 and 7 p.m. Sunday, mainly sunny skies and a high of 21. Tonight, we're down to a low of 8 degrees.
Right now, downtown Toronto, mainly clear sky and 18 degrees. We have the same conditions reported this hour at Pearson.
This extended forecast is brought to you by Dynamic Funds. You can't beat the benchmark if you are the benchmark. Dynamic Funds looks to the market for opportunities beyond the index. Learn more about active management at dynamic.ca.
The Maranello, Alfa Romeo, and Alfa Romeo of Oakville Spring Acceleration Event is on now. It's the best time to drive an Alfa Romeo with limited time lease rates starting at 2.99% and payments as low as $277 bi-weekly on the Stelvio TI SUV or $300 bi-weekly on the Giulia TI. Plus, get driver assist features, Apple CarPlay, and navigation at no extra charge. Visit MaranelloAlfaRomeo.com or AlfaRomeoofOakville.com to book your appointment today. Offer cannot be combined with any other Alfa Romeo offer. HST Extras. See dealer for details.
News is always changing. Now more than ever.
Oh, yeah, like really? You're dealing with like a main room of a condo, pretty much.
Superior Court of Justice says jury trials in the province will not resume next month as originally planned. Because of the ongoing pandemic, they'll begin in July, August, or September. It all depends on the public health situation provincially and regionally. The court also says all non-jury matters will continue virtually unless absolutely necessary to hold the proceedings in person. Well, Greyhound Canada is permanently cutting all of its bus routes across the country. The motor coach company says its remaining routes in Ontario and Quebec will cease permanently at midnight tonight. Greyhound Canada Senior Vice President says after a year of zero revenues, the company had to make a difficult decision to end its operations after more than 90 years in service. The company's American affiliate, Greyhound Lines, will continue to operate cross-border routes to Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver once the border reopens. Business is next.
Why is my dog such a big eater?
Can dogs understand language?
Hi, I'm Carrie Davis, professional dog trainer for television's hit show Hudson and Rex. Join me on the fun and informative K9 Q&A podcast.
Curious is called Arcana. Coming up, we're going to talk about Israel. The things are getting very, very serious.
And at frequencypodcastnetwork.com.
Because Hamas obviously shooting missiles, and now ground troops, the IDF, that ground troops are going into Gaza. So things are getting very, very serious. On this other side of this, we'll talk to Terry Glavin, who probably knows more about the Middle East and Israel, the conflict, and what people really should know, much of which is propaganda being pushed by the terrorist side. So we'll talk about that and try to give you a bit of a background. Coming up after this, your news at the top of the hour, here on Point on Global News Radio.
Stay up to date on the weekend with Global News Weekend. The latest news from Mark Carcasole and your weather with Carla Vosacki. Global News Weekend, Saturday and Sunday at 6 and 11, and download the Global TV app to get Global News for free anytime.
Laid off due to COVID-19? You are entitled to full severance pay if you're not recalled to work by your employer. Over 90% of employees are offered much less than they're actually owed. Get the compensation you need. Go to employmentlawyer.ca.
Spring cleaning is when homes get a new twinkle in their eye, a new spring in their step, and new color in their cheeks.
Call 1-800-GOT-JUNK. We'll be there before you hang up the phone.
When that shine.
Bitch, du weißt, wie ich heiß, ich bin Summerjam. Bloß du Logo, tu nicht so, als ob du uns nicht erkennst. Auf dem Film, den ihr fahrt, doggen wir das Patent. Komm, steig ein, und wir drehen noch ein paar Runden im Benz. Summerjam, bloß du Logo, wir sind das ist der Modus. Wenn wir posen, dann für Fotos. Weil der Mann nichts los ist, und gut am Fokus. Im Hals gehabt und ich war leicht verwirrt, als ein Kumpel mir erzählt hat, du wirst heiraten. Und ich hab so getan, als wenn es mich nicht interessiert, doch irgendwie verfolgt mich der Gedanke seit ein paar Tagen. Das kleine Stück Illusion, das da noch war, hat sich in Luft aufgelöst und ich wusste, dass der Tag kommt. Hatte eine Weile Zeit zu lernen, zu akzeptieren, dass uns nichts geblieben ist, außer ein Foto und ein paar Songs. Auch die werden an Wert verlieren. Und dieses Gefühl, es wird verschwinden mit der Zeit. Nichts bleibt, Menschen kommen und Menschen gehen. Alles ist in Bewegung, ich will nur, dass du weißt. Auch nicht in 100 Jahren könnte ich vergessen, wie sich alles verändert hat, als du in mein Leben kamst. Auch nicht in 100 Jahren könnte ich vergessen, wie wenig du nehmen wolltest und wie viel du für mich gabst. Auch nicht in 100 Jahren könnte ich vergessen, könnte ich vergessen. Könnte ich vergessen, auch nicht in 100 Jahren, auch nicht in 100 Jahren, auch nicht in 100 Jahren. Alles okay, dir geht's gut und ich will mich für dich freuen, aber irgendwie kann ich das nicht, solange Verlangen noch ist, aufzuräumen. Es sind fast so eine
back of your seat, then the guy in front of you decides to recline.
Fiercely Canadian, authentically Italian. Volvo's legendary safety, Scandinavian craftsmanship, and intuitive technology. All designed for a driving experience like no other. All designed for you to discover. From May 20th to 25th, join us for an event like no other, where you can receive up to 6 lease payments waived on select 2021 models. Don't miss your chance to experience how luxurious the road can be during Volvo's Discover Days. Conditions apply. Visit your local GTA Volvo retailer or Volvo Cars.
Changes made to your job due to COVID-19? New regulations in Ontario haven't suspended your rights. If your pay has been cut or you've been put on a temporary layoff, you can still take action. Get what you're owed. Go to employmentlawyer.ca.
Stop guessing, start knowing. 640 is powered by Global News Journalism. We are your news talk leader. 640 Toronto.
And still problems on the eastbound 403 at Dundas. The right lane's blocked for a collision involving a vehicle in the ditch. Emergency crews are on the scene of this one. Only a slight delay on the approach to it, but also on the South 410. We did have a problem spot at Courtney Park with some debris in the 2 left lanes. Reports of an earlier wheelbarrow now pushed out of the way. And also the ramp from northbound Kennedy to the west 401. That is finally reopened. From farm to table in just 4 to 7 days. Eggs brought to you by Egg Farmers of Ontario. Learn more at getcracking.ca. I'm Ari Yurbinovich, Global News Radio, 640 Toronto, Chopper Traffic.
Don't just know the story, understand it. This is CFMJ Global News Radio 640 Toronto, a Chorus Entertainment Company. You're listening to Global News Radio. This is Global News at 9 o'clock.
Good evening from the Global News Desk. I'm Darren Boland. Ontario will remain in a stay-at-home order at least until June 2nd. The Premier making that announcement today, saying we've come a long way, but we still have to remain vigilant in order to keep stress off the hospital system. Global's Dave Woodard with more.
Just hang in there we aren't asking a lot.
Premier Doug Ford says it's just another 2 weeks of the stay-at-home order before allowing some activities to return.
I expect that by June 2nd, so long as we stay the course, we will be able to reopen outdoor recreation.
After which he says he hopes we'll be able to start reopening the province.
If we manage the next few weeks properly, I believe that we can have things in a very good place this summer.
Neither the Premier or the province's medical officer of health gave details on what data we'll need to see in order to move out of the stay-at-home order June 2nd. Dave Woodard at Global News.
Well, by the end of the summer, Premier Doug Ford says all Ontario adults will be offered their second dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Ford also noted that a so-called one-dose summer, as promised by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau earlier this week, is not good enough.
I just don't believe a one-dose summer is just not good enough. You know, if we get the supply, I'll put it this way, we get the supply, we will work our backs off to have a 2-dose summer instead of a 1-dose summer.
Well, the province also announcing today that it will start administering the Pfizer vaccine to children aged 12 to 17 starting the week of May 31st. The military general leading Canada's vaccine rollout says the country will have enough of the AstraZeneca vaccine for anyone who received 1 dose to get a second. Major General Danny Fortin says the federal government received roughly 655,000 doses of AstraZeneca today from the global vaccine sharing program known as COVAX.
The situation at AstraZeneca is evolving, and we'll work with the provinces in terms of their supply needs. We want to assure everyone that sufficient supply will be available for those who want a second dose of AstraZeneca or who cannot take an mRNA vaccine.
Well, Fortin's comments come as several provinces have stopped giving first doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine, citing a rare but serious blood clotting issue linked to the shot. Well, a church based just south of London is back in court after a Superior Court judge found it and 2 pastors were in contempt. The judge has ordered the Church of God in Aylmer to stop holding indoor gatherings that exceed provincial limits, but found the church had defied his request when it live-streamed the Sunday service.
The contempt ruling arrived late last month, but since then, 2 more indoor services have been live-streamed by the church. The Crown argues this indicates the church has no plans on stopping the gatherings. The Crown wants to lock the church's doors until there are no more gathering limits in the province. It also wants $50,000 from the church, $10,000 from each of the 2 pastors, and $100,000 in legal costs. The church's lawyer, Lisa Bildy, sought to reduce the fines and lessen the length of the lockup, arguing the church has been honest in its conduct. Justice Bruce Thomas voiced concerns that the church's actions have turned Aylmer into a cauldron of hostility. Thomas is set to decide on penalties tomorrow morning. Andrew Graham, Global News.
Well, as lockdowns are lengthened and public health measures are tightened on this side of the border, a much different picture is being presented in the U.S. President Joe Biden is calling it a great day for America and a major step towards returning to pre-pandemic life. Biden says the Centers for Disease Control has announced that some Americans can stop wearing masks.
The CDC is saying they have concluded that fully vaccinated people are at a very, very low risk of getting COVID-19. Therefore, if you've been fully vaccinated, you no longer need to wear a mask.
The new CDC guideline says calls for wearing masks in crowded indoor settings, but it clears the way for reopening workplaces and schools. Well, it was a service that helped Canadians travel their way home, or travel their home country, that is, for more than 90 years. Greyhound has announced it is permanently cutting all of its bus routes across the country.
Greyhound Canada has struggled for years with declining ridership, mainly driven by competition and deregulation in the industry. But it says the last straw was a dramatic loss of revenue during the COVID-19 pandemic. Senior Vice President Stuart Kendrick says it was a tough decision to make.
It's been a lifeline for many Canadians on travel, whether it be for school, employment, or leisure. It's sad. It's a massive impact to us all.
About 260 employees were laid off last May when Greyhound Canada temporarily ended passenger service. Another 45 employees will be laid off now. Canadian routes ending as of tonight include Toronto to Ottawa and Montreal, Toronto, London, Windsor, and Toronto to Kitchener, Guelph, Cambridge. Brianna Carnegie, Global News.
You can get the GTA's top stories on demand. Set your Alexa flash briefing to play 640 Toronto. In sports, the Toronto Maple Leafs and Montreal Canadiens will open their first playoff series in 42 years, May 20th at Scotiabank Arena. The NHL released its schedule for the opening round of the 2020-21 playoffs today, with the All-Canadian North Division starting its series a couple of days later than its U.S.-based divisions. With the brooms out in Atlanta this afternoon, the Blue Jays beat the Braves 8-4, completing the 6-game season sweep. Toronto is back on the diamond tomorrow in Dunedin, facing off against the Phillies. Meanwhile, the Raptors are on the court in Chicago tonight, taking on the Bulls, and the game now at the half, Chicago leading Toronto.
Listen, Bo's,
This is On Point with Alex Pearson on Global News Radio.
I can't believe I took the trouble to take my cigarette pack.
A ruthless jihadi terrorist organization that has no regard for civilian life, not for Palestinian life, and definitely not for Israeli life.
That is the voice of Israeli Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, revealing that Hamas and other militant jihadis have now launched more than 1,600 rockets into Israel.
Yeah, but
many
define rocket. No, seriously, where do these people get 1,600
and
of
as the
anything?
bombs, rain down on Israel, the predictable blame game is underway,
Tunnels
because
from
Israel
Egypt,
is always
right?
seen as
Something
the
to that.
aggressor when responding to terror attacks, and that's because
Ich komm und hol mir den Kopf. Neues Reisen mit das Bein, aber ich spiele kein Golf. Wir kicken von unten herauf an die Spitze und ich bin raus. Die Krone, sie kicken zu schwer für euch, because der Bär ist die Uhr und ich warte auf euch. Ich warte auf euch.